So we're just going to go ahead and start our broadcast now, and Seth is going to...
We have his profile. See, he's right there. We have this profile up. Oh, wait, there's a reward for him. Hey, guys, if you see him, you get money, apparently.
Yeah, $3,000 reward or $5,000 reward. He's going to be fashionably late here. We're going to roll down the red carpet and play like royalty music.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, since Trent's not here, I'm really think he started watching the first episode of season 2 of Westworld and is like, screw this, guys. I'm watching the show. This is awesome.
I thought else he's going to the midnight showing of Avengers Infinity War. That was going on with I was taking the tennis team with my head coach to a mall where the theater's on one side and the food cart's on the other side, and there was like people that were cosplaying, and it was
oh my god, that's so awesome.
Yeah, getting ready for that showing tonight.
Oh, if I didn't have my two kids, if my two kids didn't have school tomorrow, I'd be there. I would be right there, all moved out, man. There's no way I wouldn't. It's just you have to be a responsible parent. Like, dude, we could go like to a midnight movie of a movie that's 2.5 hours and have kids. Come on, kids. That's not really call in sick tomorrow. You look really sick.
Well, we're getting a bunch of viewers now. Hey,
are we?
We got a few of them. Yeah, we definitely have Carter here in the chat. Hey, Carter, good to hear from you.
Hey, I figured we'd be too late for most of the guys.
Pretty late for us here. Yeah, we're definitely going later than we normally do. But yeah, we got some people. I'm hoping that this time being off, hopefully we pull up. Oh, it's Murr. East Coast.
Holy cow.
This is one of those, Murr, this is where you get a patch for showing up, because this is that, like, times are all off. Hey, and there's Paul. Paul, welcome. And hopefully, Paul, you're feeling better. I mean, it's getting nice out. I don't know. My wife's been dealing with terrible allergies with this beautiful weather. And it's going to go even later, Murr. Hey, and there's Carmen. Welcome,
holy
Carmen.
Cow. That is some dedication.
Bunch of new stuff on
all
Game Surplus I saw him
like
put up.
A ribbon or something. I don't know. They should get like.
Hey, TC, I think you have a ghost in your background. And Seth, by the way, just wanted you to know we are already recording. This is all going up. We've got our chat going, and we'll just do a little countdown to that so I can know when to start editing and everything. But just know anything that you say from this point forward can and will be used against you.
All right. Do you need me to record on Audacity or something, or you got?
Actually, I've not been. We haven't been doing backups on Audacity. It's just it ends up being almost as much of a pain when things cut out and stuff. So I haven't needed it for a while, and let's just, I guess, keep our fingers crossed here. Google Hangouts and YouTube live broadcasts.
The last problem I had, I just threw it through Levelator, and everything came out somewhat okay. So if you have troubles, you'll just give me the file, and I can adjust the levels as needed.
So I'm gonna go ahead. I'll go ahead and record it on my end just for the heck of it, and then if you ever do need it, I'll have it.
Oh,
sounds good.
You're more prepared than both of us combined.
I feel like I'm doing my part.
Sounds good. Yes, that would be great. Yes.
All right.
It sounds like we even had our Murr, one of our super listeners. Like I said, this is that episode you get the patch for with how late we're recording. You get the collector's patch. It's like I showed up. I was there. Murr actually took a nap to be able to be here. So I'm assuming though, Murr, that nap was not going to interrupt the 1,400 playing or whatever. I think it's 1,200 and some odd days that he's been playing board games every single day, without missing a day.
Oh,
Seth, I think when Seth
those days.
Yeah, when you go without playing board games for a day, I think they call it a vacation.
Well, I wish that were the case. I actually go a lot of days without playing games nowadays, and that's kind of too bad. I miss when I used to play games a lot more frequently. Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the things about working in the industry, though, right? You theoretically play a lot of games, but when I do play a lot of games, often it's playtesting or it's playing submissions or whatever, and it's not. So even if I'm playing games, it's not necessarily the same as playing games, which is why I have come to really appreciate. Have you guys been to any of these small like invite only conventions, like Sasquatch? There's one in Seattle.
I've been to Sasquatch up here in Seattle. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you? When did you go, or when have you gone?
Oh, it was been several years ago, but I went. That's when I learned the term mule and going to Essen.
Sure. Yeah, because Jennifer Gessie, the person that runs that, she sends people to Essen to bring back new stuff. And I've been going to Sasquatch for a few years now. My sister lives up in Seattle. and her family. I got friends from college and high school that live in Bellevue and Redmond, and so I love going to Sasquatch. I get to see my friends. I get to see my sister. I get to play games, the new stuff that just came out, and I don't have to demo stuff or take pitches, and I get to like let someone else teach me a game for a change. That's my vacation con.
Nice.
Is going there. And because if I go to Gen Con, I mean, Gen Con's never been that fun for me, fun in air quotes, because it's 4 days in a row of what used to be 14-hour days. I've dialed it back, and now it's only like 10-hour days. But it's it's work, and it's long hours, and I try to squeeze in as much fun as possible. That's why they're 14 hours. I try to, after all is said and done, I want to hang out for a couple hours, even though it's 1 a.m. or whatever. But yeah, so Gen Con's all work. Origins is a little better, but it's similar. It's work. BGG Con's like 50-50. I do some playtesting. I do some a little bit of work type stuff at BGG Con, but I get a chance to play some stuff. But it's nothing compares anymore to being able to go up to Seattle and just be like, okay, I get to relax and actually play some games. Let's learn some new games.
Sweet. I'll have to talk to James, because usually James invites a bunch of us cloud cappers to go up with them. I haven't been able to go for the last few years, but maybe I'll pester him to see if I can hitch a ride this year, because they're already talking about getting rooms up there and everything.
Yeah, this year, since we're having the kid, I don't know how many cons I'll be able to go to. I'm hoping that by November maybe it'd be okay, but I don't know. I would hate to miss that trip. Michelle comes with me. We sometimes will go see she's a big fan of Nirvana, so we went and saw the Pop Culture Museum, the Museum of Pop Culture. Nice. Which used to be called something else, but they have an awesome Nirvana exhibit, and they've got other cool exhibits. I went there and there was a Star Wars costume exhibit or something.
Yeah, they had a costume exhibit up there not too long ago. That was pretty fantastic to see.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool place while I'm up there. But mostly I like to visit, just hang out with my friends, play games, visit Mock's Boarding House. People go to Seattle and they want to see people go to Seattle and they want to see Pike's Place Market or they want to see the fish ladders or whatever. I'm like, no, I want to see Mock's Boarding House.
I don't have any friends up in the Northwest. I would just say I have somebody that I would consider a lifelong rival that lives in Portland, and I just I always say it gives me the sweats to think about what it'd be like to actually meet him in person.
Where are you, Joe?
I'm in Iowa, actually.
Oh, that's much better. There's no sarcasm in that at all. I've never been to Iowa. Maybe it's awesome. Hey, doesn't I mean, Iowa's super small or something, but doesn't Joel Eddy live in Iowa?
Okay, he lives in Idaho.
Yeah,
Idaho, Iowa.
Wow, I mean the same. That's awesome.
I just validated all the T-shirts. We have T-shirts that say Ohio, the Great Potato State, and they're slapped on top of a picture of Iowa.
That reminds me of that. R2-D2, I loved you in Star Trek on a picture of the Dalek or whatever.
Yeah. So, I do want to make it up there. I think it'd be awesome to make it up there for one of those conventions too. And I know that this is on my bucket list now that TC's out there. I finally have influence spread across the northwestern part of the country, and have the ability to go up there and
if you want to
find some places.
I could have gotten us on a panel at GameStorm this year. Just saying.
It would have been awesome, man. It's that timing though. It's that timing. It's a really, really busy time.
GameStorm. I mean, is that really a challenge? Is that really a? I'm just kidding.
Not really. All I have to do is be like, "Hey, I want to do this." Oh, really? You want to do it? Cool. You're in charge of it. I said, "No, I want to participate."
Exactly. I know how that goes. So speaking of conventions, if you're ever down in the Tucson or Arizona area around end of September, check out RingCon. There was a small convention got started here in town by some people, and I was kind of around, but I wasn't in charge of it. And it went on for a couple of years, and it got bigger and bigger. And then all the people that were running it just left town all of a sudden. They all moved away, and they just kind of dropped. It just kind of dropped. And so it didn't happen one year. And I thought, okay, this is dumb. Why? There's no reason we shouldn't have a convention here, especially when we already did have one, and nobody else was doing it. So I just kind of picked it up and said, I'm going to run it. So I, with zero experience and zero knowledge of how to run a convention, I went ahead and did it. And it was a little crazy, but I got RingCon going, and it went off pretty well. And there's and the first year, and then the second year it happened again, and the third year, and I started getting people to help me out with it and stuff. And I did it for like 4 or 5 years, and then this last year I turned over the reins. Finally, I just had so many things going on, I couldn't keep doing it.
Yeah.
And I turned over the reins to some of the people that were really helping me for the last few years. And for once, I got to go to RainCon without having to run it, which was nice. Except I could only go on Friday because Saturday morning I had to fly to California for a wedding.
No.
It's like, oh my gosh. I finally get a chance to enjoy the convention that I built and helped manage for a while, and I didn't get to. So typical.
Well, that's awesome. But, so you said it was about 5 years ago or so that you kind of took over?
2012, I think.
Wow.
Was the first one I did. So I mean, it's not that I took over a convention. I sort of like started a convention, but I had the benefit of one having existed recently.
Yeah, so you actually had to like start from the ground up. So you basically it was like you built in a lot that was commercially zoned.
Sure, something like that. I mean, it was nice that it was definitely, I'm sure, easier to do that when there had been a convention. People, I don't know. I got some advice from the people that had run it before and things like that. But I really had no experience, and I was kind of playing it by ear. And that first year, especially, like I was just pretty much all me. There wasn't really anyone else. A couple people helped with a couple things, but it wasn't like I had a staff. And so I was kind of muscling through it myself. It was a way easier when I started having people help me out, like volunteer to help me out, and they were great. The people that run it now, they were big time helpers for a couple of years, and they were really great, and they're doing a better job than I am as far as I'm concerned. It was kind of like I wanted it to happen, but I didn't actually want to run a convention, so I was just calling it a success when the convention happened. But I didn't want it to be bad. I wanted it to be good, but I'm like, there was only so much
to happen more than anything. It was more like that you took something and made something out of it, regardless of whether or not, no thinking of like analytics or numbers or whatever, it was.
Yeah. I didn't, well, it wasn't like, I didn't look at it like, oh, how can I make this better? It's like, I want it to happen. And if people can show up and play games, then it's accomplished.
Like you want people to be able to say, did you go to RingCon this year? And not be like, oh, did you go to RingCon? Oh, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. But so these helpers that I had are much better at like trying to make it better. I just wanted to provide a place for people to show up and play games. So that's what I was. I was like, not. I mean, I didn't want it to be bad, like I said, but I had a hard time trying to make it any better because I just didn't. I don't know. I just didn't have the impetus. But
you're just one
Karen
person
and Tony do.
Also. I mean, it's one person. So that's an interesting hat, though, that I didn't know that you'd worn is in terms of designer, publisher, playtester, developer, game convention originator, and sole staff.
Kind of, yeah. And like I said, it got a lot better when I got Karen and Tony are the ones that run it now, and they were huge help for the last few years. And I had some other helpers too. We actually had like a small staff of volunteers, which is great. And like I said, they're probably better at doing that than I ever was. So good for them. Like good. I'm glad that it's running. I'm glad it's happening. I'm glad it's being run by people that are better at it than I am. And I'll take the little bit of pride that comes with having sort of started it. And to be honest, though, I got a lot of. I mean, it wasn't the perfect convention, but I got a lot of people telling me that it was good and they liked it and everything. So I feel like it was not, it wasn't a failure or anything. I'm really happy with how it went. If I were the type to aspire to running the best convention ever, then I would have been disappointed that I didn't do a better job, maybe. But to be honest, I was actually pretty proud of how it went, and we were able to like increase people. Like we had like 500 people or something last year.
Pretty darn good.
So yeah, it's doing pretty good. And the fact that I didn't
actually could work for me sometime. 2 of my 3 groomsmen, even though they lived like within an hour, a few, I guess, from where I live here in Iowa and where I lived at the time in Northeast Missouri, they lived really close to me then, so it wasn't asking much of them to come to my wedding and be my groomsmen. But for some reason, in the last like year, 2 of the 3 have moved out there to like Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I have like more of my groomsmen live out in Arizona than live like actually around me anymore.
And there's another convention that a guy up in Phoenix runs called AZ Game Fair, Arizona Game Fair, and he's also just killing it. He's crushing it with his all his stuff. He's really trying to, I don't know, make a good convention go on, and he's doing a great job so far. So yeah, Arizona Game Fair is a good one. I think that's in like February or something. And then Rincon if you're in the Tucson area. So people who are listening, let me look at the chat. Is anyone in there? If you're in the area, you can totally come to Rincon.
Yeah, make it out there.
Yeah, and Arizona Game Fair. Well, there's a lot of good game stuff going on in Arizona, man. For a while there were a number of publishers and designers too. Like Mike Mendez, the founder of TMG. He moved to Utah, but for a while he was here. And then Patrick Nickel, Crash Games, was here, and David Short lives here. He's designer of Ground Floor and planes and automobiles, and a number of other games he's got coming out, I'm pretty sure. So he lives here in town. There's myself. There's Tori Neiman lives up in Phoenix, the Alien Frontiers guy. Yeah. And one of the McKenzie brothers, the guy that designed, oh gosh, what is the name of that game with dragons and deck building? Prince of the Dragon Throne? Princes of the Dragon Throne? So there's a game called Princes of the Dragon Throne. And you should check it out if you like deck building and area control. And it's made by a guy named Fred McKenzie, whose brother was the guy that was like Clever Mojo Games, if you follow.
Yeah, I remember that.
So Fred lives up in Phoenix as well. Like there's a lot of game stuff going on in Arizona. The game scene down here is actually bigger than you'd think for like a small town or a backwards like old west town. dust
the old desert, the tumbleweeds that are blowing across the roads.
Yeah. Sure.
The wild chickens that you have to chase, away when you back out your car in the morning.
Oh, they're pretty good at running on their own. It's cool.
No. Yeah, well, here it's just like watching corn grow. So it's pretty quiet. There's not that many people.
One time I flew up to Utah and then drove with Michael to Gen Con from Utah to Indianapolis. And that was the first. I don't travel much in the country. I don't see much of the Midwest or whatever. But yeah, there were like miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. We were just driving by corn. I don't remember where that was or whatever, but we were just driving by cornfields.
I was probably hidden a few rows back, but yeah, I'm sure I was there.
Yeah, you're right behind some of that corn. Yeah, it was impressive the amount of just like corn that we drove by. So
you're really digging deep for compliments here, Seth, but I appreciate it. It's okay. It's okay. We're like, it's about a 3-hour drive from Minneapolis, and having like Fantasy Flight up there and having it be pretty close to like the birthplace of D&D and stuff over in Wisconsin. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but I think that when it comes to like gaming for a large part of things, it's like, there's no professional sports team in Iowa. Neither is there like, so many things. It's like, well, we can drive 3 hours to get there, and that's really nice stuff there. So
we're a Magic Den, since Wizards of the Coast is just a little ways up.
Yeah, I like the Pacific Northwest. It's nice. I like the weather up there is pretty good a lot of the time, and I go up there in the summer, so it's nice then. And
yeah, it's a little wet during the
yeah, and there's just like the community or whatever. Just like I don't know. I just like it. I go to Seattle in particular. I've been to Portland too, but like, I don't know. I just like hanging out in Seattle. I go there. I until recently I've been going there for like the last 14 years for about a week or two in 4th of July time for a Frisbee tournament, and then just hang around to visit my friends and whatnot, and just hang around in the nice. I mean, it's 115 degrees or something here, 107 degrees.
Yeah, here so it's 80.
Yeah, it's like super nice. It's like 85, and people are like, "Oh my god, it's so hot."
I know. The sun comes out, people are like, "Ah!" I'm like, dude, I grew up in the high plains where the sun was your enemy. This is nice, guys.
Yeah, that would literally happen all the time. Everyone's complaining about, oh, it's a heat wave. It's 85 degrees, and I'm thinking. I'm like, this is gorgeous. This is great. Let's go outside and hang around in the sun. Anyway, so I don't know if I'm screwing up here. Do you have like a structure or a schedule or something like?
Oh, well, I think I'll probably just
start the countdown yet, Joe.
We haven't done the countdown. There wasn't a moment for it. I guess we'll just start the countdown now. A lot of times what I do is I just take this as a lump and put it in as kind of an outtake at the end. But I'm not really sure, like, if I'm actually going to do that, or if I'm just, I might just maybe find a spot to start, and maybe I'll actually take our countdown and put it before. I don't know. It's going to be interesting when I put this together. But we'll do a countdown now just in case, and I'll try to say when I do a bit of an intro, I'll be like, all right, well, we talked for quite a while here before we got started. It doesn't really go in with the episode, but I'm going to put it at the end here and listen at your own risk. It's a whole lot of bashing on the Midwest, and that'll be it. And I'll be like, I'll say that through tears. It'll be like I'll be sobbing, and I'll be like, but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, we don't have Trent here to defend wherever the heck he's from.
Well, he's from here too. He's from where I'm from. So yeah, he's
okay.
Yeah. It would have been, we would have been able to gang up on you at least, but usually Midwest people don't do that. Usually we just kind of are polite, nod, and take it, take it. Yeah. But we're passive aggressive, so I would have like waited for a moment later on in the episode, which I'm still planning on doing, to like say like gotcha. It's like I have nothing to do with this, but it's gonna be like
Well, if there's one thing better than passive aggressiveness, it's premeditated passive aggressiveness. So that's good.
I'm already cooking one up, man. You just make it. Keep saying things. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. I just it's like that rubber band stretching further and further back. Anyway, yeah, we're not gonna snap though. But we will get started here, and I have an awkwardly long count, so that way I can see this from
5 miles from orbit.
Yeah, I'll see this from space when I do the editing, so I can at least know where to go in. So, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Joe Sallin. I'm the only one here who lives in apparently a wasteland that nobody even can remember the name of.
Iowa. Confused.
I'm from Iowa, not Idaho, not Ohio. We don't have potatoes. We don't have many people either, but I happen to be one of them, and I'm very proud to be from this state, even though all of my friends are moving to where our special guest is from. He's Seth Jaffee. Hopefully I'm saying that right, man. Am I already
That's exactly right.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. I've heard it before. So Seth Jaffee is from Phoenix, or not Phoenix, Tucson, Arizona, where all of my friends tend to be leaving me for at this point in my life right now. But anyway, out there it's really nice and sunny, and I think it's only like 150 today, right? It only made it up there to
it's in the 90s.
Here it's a nice spring day.
Yeah, it's actually in the 90s. I understand people are under like snow still, and like Lance Meister from from TMG's our buddy. I hear he's still like complaining about snow, even though it's quote unquote spring. But yeah, it's like 90 something here. Yeah,
we're not too far off from where Lance is from. Actually, I could get there in a day of travel. So yeah, it's we've been dealing with that around here, but it's been nice for like the last week, which is pretty great. From what I understand, it's not all too bad up there in the Northwest either, where TC Reed, other co-host, is here from.
Fine. We are commonly referred to as a hipster wasteland. So,
and I think have to say that it's a wasteland where hipsters live, or is it a wasteland where there are no hipsters? I don't know.
Or maybe I should rephrase that. It's a place where people who are 35 come to retire and grow a beard. Yes, I'm here from the Portland, Oregon, representing, yay, and it was sunny, not raining, so it's very nice as opposed to the nuclear dawn going on where Seth is at.
Yeah. Well, it looks like TC, you there have your homework brought to class.
I am prepared. Yeah. I am prepared. Yes, I'm going to torment Seth with some memories and maybe some discussions about some things. I still have Microcosm around here, but I wasn't able to dig that one out, but it is present in spirit over there in that shelf.
Very cool. Eminent Domain Microcosm, it's about this big.
That
so
big.
It's not anywhere. So for folks that are unfamiliar with our special guest host here, Seth Jaffee has designed board games, has published and developed board games for Tasty Minstrel Games, and if you've ever played Eminent Domain or many other Terra Prime, there's some other ones to his name, but there's just a big laundry list of games, and Eminent Domain is the big headliner that we're going to be talking about today, together with whatever else just comes to Seth's mind. He also actually, as we talked about in our pre-show warm-up, started and single-handedly ran a game convention. So anything else, Seth, that I would have missed for, what is the introduction that you truly deserve?
Well, a lot of people mention that I'm, I guess my title is co-founder and head of development for Tasty Minstrel Games. I'm often associated with my buddy Michael Mendez, who started a publishing company, you know, back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually coming up on a 10-year anniversary of that, which will become relevant later. And
Really?
yeah,
Hey, what do you
so,
know? 2000.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, TMG was the company was founded in April 2009.
2009.
And so yeah, it's currently April 2018, which so technically we're 9 years old, but we're coming up on our 10th anniversary. And like I like to say, you know, when it's people start celebrating Christmas in November, not in January. So
yes, that's true.
Yeah, so that's something that people know me from. So yeah, a lot of people have played Eminent Domain. Very few people have played Terra Prime.
I'm one of them.
Somewhere in between, some number in between, it played a little game called Isle of Trains that I co-designed with a friend of mine here in town. But that was published by not Tasty Minstrel. It was published by Dice Hate Me Games. But that's another good one. If it's a
I have actually played Isle of Trains. Yeah, it was a cool little game.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. There's an expansion for it that theoretically is going to be coming out eventually, but I'm not sure.
It was like a deck of cards type game, wasn't it? It was just.
It was one of their rabbit lines, so it was like 50 some odd cards, 54 card. It was a contest, a 54 card game design contest, and they let us have 56 cards, I think, in the end. And so we made a game. Actually, it was Dan Keltner is the co-designer on that, and to be honest, it was really he had a game. And it was 200 something cards, and I liked it. And I told him, I bet you could cut that down to 54 cards and enter this contest. And he asked if I wanted to help him do that, and I'm like, sure. So we did. And then we didn't win the contest, but we like tied for third. Originally, they didn't expect to get 108 entries, which they ended up getting.
Wow.
This is Dice Hate Me. Dice Hate Me did this contest, and they didn't expect to get so many entries, but they got like 108 entries, and they were going to publish. They had like 3 titles they were going to put in this line of like the small box one deck games, and they were looking for like one more in this contest, and they ended up deciding to take the top 3 in the contest because they had so many entries and some of them were really good that they liked them. And then they decided when they were trying to cut it down to the top 3, they had a tie for third, so we snuck in there under the wire. And so Isle of Trains was tied for third place in their contest and got published as part of that. And it so happens that my understanding is it's sold maybe better than some of the other ones they published in that line, and they asked us for an expansion, which we gave them, and I keep waiting to see when that is going to come up in line. I'm not sure what their schedule is on that, but there's a All Aboard expansion which will be coming out I don't know, whenever.
I don't know. All right, so whenever I don't know rolls around, keep your finger to the pulse with Seth and are you guys co-designed this one? Did you guys co-design this one now from the ground up with the expansion, or
the expansion we both worked on together? Dan and I worked on together. The original game we also worked on together, but it was something that Dan had already kind of started. So we were working from basically it felt like a development project because I was working with someone else's game basically to like make it whatever, fit this format and whatever. But the expansion we both had ideas for and we both worked on together. So that was more that felt more like a co-design because I was in there from the start of the expansion. Development's weird because like sometimes you're effectively like a co-designer even if you're not technically a co-designer, and other times you're just tweaking something here or there like an insightful playtester. So it's weird how that works out. And I could talk at length about that. In fact,
I hope you do. I hope you will, because we are definitely.
I really hope they do a reprint of Isle of Trains because I got a chance to play it and really enjoyed it and started looking for a copy and couldn't find one readily available. And there are quite a few people I know who in this area like train games and like, hey, look, a light train game we can play in like 30 minutes. Come on.
Yeah, I think it just came out in German.
There we go.
Wow, nice.
It's got a fun name in German. It's called Bummelbahn.
I do like its English name as well. But what I remember of it was, it's one where you're kind of adding the cars to the train, right? When you kind of have a train and you have the cards that you
yeah. So each player starts with an engine in play, and each card, it's got multi-use cards, which is one of my favorite card mechanisms or parts of a game. So each card could be a train card that you could add to your train, or it could be money to pay for a card with, like a la Race for Galaxy or something.
Sure.
Or it can be the resource type that you can load onto either your train, so you'll have resources on your train, or you can load it on your opponent's train and get rewarded. So Diane's whole point of this game was to try to make a game where you're like willing to help out your opponent. So if I load coal onto your train, I get to draw some cards and maybe take an extra action or do a build or something. So like depending, the different cars offer different rewards for having for loading them up, but you only get the reward if you load your opponent's train. And then there are contracts which you can deliver these things that are on your train for either more cards, which is like money, or to complete contracts, which gets you points basically. Sure. So you're drawing cards, you're spending cards to build trains, you're wanting to build the trains that carry the right stuff so that you can do the contracts you want, and you're loading your own train so you can do contracts, or you're loading your opponent's train more often so that you can get the benefits. Like if I load a expensive, valuable resource onto your train, you've got a resource you can deliver for points. But I've got, I get to draw a bunch of cards and do a free load action or something.
For sure, yeah. It's all coming back to me. And I remember that the person that showed me this game was Trent, who really wanted to be here, Seth, and just was he was doing all that he could to try to stay awake. We're burning the midnight oil, recording a little bit past our normal recording time, but he's got a bunch of fragments of his being that he's left behind, even though he has passed through the ethers of Somnia. He's with Somnus at this point, but he's left quite a few notes. And Isle of Trains, I don't even know that he remembered that you were involved in that design process, but that was a shred of him is coming back to me now. He showed me that game, and I know that he really liked it. I really liked it. Very cool little game. You're right. It had multi-use cards that were used for many different things, and my KG Euro-centric group did not help each other out nearly enough. So cool little concept, though. So, well, Seth, welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. It's great to have you on. And we're going to go ahead and get our review section started here and let you kick it off with a game. We'll just have you review a single game here because we are kind of nearing a clock, if you will, a nuclear moment. Anyway, though, before we get to that, I just would like to remind all of our listeners out there that we are sponsored by Game Surplus, and you should go check out all the things that were just added yesterday on April 25th. There were some really cool additions to what Game Surplus was offering. I know they have the expansion there to Mall. Ooh, crap. Maze Mall? Ooh, no, what was it? What was the name of the one that was Spiel des Jahres nominated? The one where all the guys in the maze where it's basically shoplifting except you're adventurers, so it's like okay to shoplift apparently.
Was that Magic Maze?
Magic Maze, that's it. They have the expansion to Magic Maze, which has just right on the top of my list of like, oh, I want to see what more stuff they added, because they already kind of made that system where you could add all these cool things to it. And I just want to see, like, where is the ceiling for this type of little family game that won, or got nominated for Spiel des Jahres. Anyway, you can check that out together with a bunch of other really cool and sometimes tough to find games. Citrus, I know, was on there, and that's one that's never been really that super easy to find here in the States. Citrus, a nice little Euro game. So anyway, check out Game Surplus.
So Citrus is coming out from TMG, by the way.
Oh my goodness!
What? No.
So I don't know if that
great minds think alike.
I don't know if that was coming out. It's on BGG or whatever, I believe. Citrus, you're talking about by is it Jeff Allers? Is that the designer?
Yes, Jeff Allers, I believe.
Yeah. So that's one of the ones that's. I mean, it's like in the process somewhere. I'm not sure if it's in manufacturing or
deluxified. That's like your guys' buzzword is deluxified. Like you have to. It's to the point where when you guys run a Kickstarter, you have to basically explain to everybody why you're not deluxifying the game.
Yeah, that is a thing. It's not. Citrus is not being deluxified. I believe it's in manufacturing at the moment. I'm actually not positive exactly where it is in the process, but yeah, it's one of the ones. Unless I'm crazy, it's one of the ones that we're doing.
So you could be the hipster. Check it out before it becomes cool, because Tasty Minstrel, you guys do a great job distributing games a lot. So you could definitely get that great game from a great place at Game Surplus and get it from a great publisher when it becomes cool.
Yeah, it might have just come out actually. I seem to have a note that April 4th, something about April 4th. So it might have just come out.
Right.
Anyway, so did you want me to jump into a review?
Yes, sir.
That would be awesome, dude. Kick it off here. You first.
Okay, so I will say I'm going to cheat a tiny bit because I'm going to do like 1.5 games. So I just received recently in the mail Steamrollers. Now, Steamrollers is a roll and write game that is reminiscent of or based on Age of Steam / Railroad Tycoon / Railways of the World / Steam. Are you guys familiar with this game?
I'm not familiar with the one that you're talking about, but like Age of Steam was like, I think if you were to put a single game as our top podcast pick, it would be that one. It was the one that like made it in on almost all of our lists.
Great. That's cool. So one of my favorite games is Railroad Tycoon. And I say Railroad Tycoon and not Age of Steam because I actually like Railroad Tycoon better. And I say Railroad Tycoon and not Railways of the World because I'm more familiar. I always played it when it was Railroad Tycoon. So Railways of the World, I mean, it's the same game. I haven't played Steam, which is like kind of halfway in between, I understand, between Age of Steam and Railroad Tycoon. And I only played Age of Steam, I think, once. But and I had a somewhat perhaps controversial thread that I started on Board Game Geek where I said that I felt like Age of Steam was like a early prototype of Railroad Tycoon. It felt like it to me. I don't know.
Oh my goodness, man! Here's the thing. Like I'm just gonna let you get away with that. Okay, I'm just gonna let you go. But Trent here, the fragment of Trent's personality is just turning over in his bed because he's not dead. He's not as great.
He's not actually dead. Yeah. I had some reasons for that, and I probably stand by them. And I'm not going to say that Railroad Tycoon is the best version of that game. And I think some improvements were made with Railways to the World. And I know there's a bunch of expansions to Railways to the World that I haven't gotten a chance to play. But my point is, I really like the game. And one of the things I really like about Railroad Tycoon, or any of those, even Age of Steam and any of those games, is when I think of what makes a game epic or have a really like a feeling of progression, this is my go-to thought. Because like you start a game of Railroad Tycoon with like no track and play and a level 1 engine, so you can build like, you know, you're struggling to get 1-point deliveries. Like you're looking for 1-point deliveries because you have zero money and zero income and you have to take debt to do anything. So at the beginning of the game, you're like, oh, where can I get a 1-point delivery? And then as you grow the game, like the scope of the game increases. It's like the camera zooms out, and by the mid game, you've got, you know, longer bits of track, and you're looking, you know, 1-point deliveries aren't good enough anymore. Now you're looking for 3-point deliveries. And by the end of the game, you've crossed the mountains. You've got track that's going like halfway across the country, and you're looking at like, how could I survive off these 1- and 3-point deliveries? You're passing over those for
the scale,
because they're just not good enough anymore. So the scope of that game just increases from like a zoomed in, like I got nothing and I've, you know, starting from nothing to I've got a rail empire that like is big and spans the country and is good. And I really like how the cost of a scaling up like that is kind of tied in, because as your points go up, your income goes up to a point. After a certain point, your points keep going up and your income starts to go down. And depending on how many shares of stock that you've had to take in order to get money, and depending on what your situation is, like you can start to really feel the effects of this scaled up cost. I had one game I played, and this is unusual. This is not usually the case. But I had a friend who took an incredible amount of stock, did some deficit spending, and in the end of the game, he had so many points that he was losing money. He had to like take stock to pay his stock back, but he had so many points that he was beating us. And I swear to God, he ended the game with 44 shares of stock.
Whoa.
That is unheard of. And he won. So it was unheard of. It was ridiculous.
Thinking of just being bleeding everywhere when he's like that, just profusely bleeding on the table.
I cannot recall how this came to be. And it wasn't like, I mean, we were all experts, but we weren't all newbies either. So sure. I don't remember how that happened, but I remember, and I might be exaggerating it a tiny bit in my mind. Like maybe it's grown in the, you know, with time, but it was incredible. Now, more often you see people win a game with like 6 shares or as many as 13 shares isn't out of the question. Like a friend of mine I BGG Con. I taught him this game. He wasn't like a gamer that plays games all the time, but he was the type that would, and he was, smart and good at finance and stuff. He had a job in finance, and he went ahead and did some deficit spending. He won the game, and he had 13 shares. And that it's not unheard of, but like some of these it's neat how different that is than trying to win the game with like a low number of shares.
Yeah,
and I've also
run like a really tight ship.
Yeah, I've tried to play that game without taking any shares, and I don't recommend that. That's you can do it if under certain circumstances you can do it. You'll lose miserably, but it can be done, and you can feel proud of yourself that you didn't take any shares. But you really need to take at least one or two at the beginning. But if you can, anyway, it's really cool that you can have these different approaches. I really like the scaling up of the scope of that game, and I like how so in Age of Steam, they had what was called income reduction, which I think that the Railroad Tycoon version of that is just a way better implementation of it. Just automatically, like, you look at your score and that's how much income you get, and then they automatically adjust it based on how well you're doing, rather than having to like adjust your marker on a thing because you hit an arbitrary point and whatever, and having someone else give you a point to knock you over the edge so you can fall back. Weird stuff like that happened in Age of Steam, and that's part of why I feel like Railroad Tycoon is a better game. But anyway, so that's one of my favorite games, and I'd like to say that it's got some downsides too, and there's a bunch of variants that have played with or would play with, and I think the game could be improved.
Well, there's like a million ways to play the game, just with maps and variants, and every map in itself is kind of a variant. So I mean, if you don't like what you're getting with the base game, there's probably something still there for you.
Sure, but there's some variant rules that we play with a slightly different, like, instead of putting one card out every round and having it like, oh, maybe half the time the auction for turn order doesn't matter because nobody cares about the card. We do that a little bit differently and stuff like that. But that's not really the point. What I wanted to get talk about that game because I like it a lot. But I was bringing it up to contrast it with Steamrollers, which is a new game that came out that is a roll and write that is heavily inspired by, I guess, Age of Steam and that kind of game.
Sure. So
I actually saw a prototype of this. I was in France, and I happened to be in France at the same time as Bruno Faiduti has this, like, he doesn't call it this, but it should be called the Gathering of France, like the Gathering of, because it's his version of the Gathering of Friends, but it's in France. So anyway, it's in this like little town in France, and I took a train and I got there, and it was really awesome to see all these French people and like see what was going on. And while I was there, I saw this prototype of Steamrollers, and I was like, that looks really cool. And later, when I saw it on Kickstarter, I was like, I got to have that. So I did get it, and I do have it, and I have played it. And it is a pretty good distillation of that kind of game. Now, I won't say I like it as much as Railroad Tycoon because I just like, I would rather play the bigger, deeper game where you get to build up your empire over more time and you get to do more stuff. But as a quick kind of filler roll and write, like, roll and write games are kind of hit and miss. There's a lot of them are very light, and I don't like games that are super light necessarily. So a lot of them I don't necessarily catch my interest. But this one has the benefit of it being like Railroad Tycoon, and so it's got you can increase your engine size. You can build track by drawing it on the board. And what I should probably say how it works. What you do is you roll some dice every round, and you roll one die that has like the different tracks on it, and you can draw a straight track or a gentle curve or a sharp curve, and the dice, each side of the die shows 2 of those, so you don't have free reign. And then you just go around, and on your turn you get to do one thing. You get to you draft a die, because you have some regular dice too, so you draft a die. You can use that die to either draw a track on the board based on what's on the other die, so you'll have 2 options of the 3. You can increase your engine so you can make longer deliveries. You can make a delivery, and there's a central board that shows you put some cubes in each city, and the regions are the cities are colored. So there's like a blue cube, and you can deliver that to a blue city if you have a big enough train. And if the blue city is number 1 or whatever, then you can draft the die number 1 to like deliver the blue cube to city number 1, as long as you have a big enough train and connect a track. And you can the other thing that's cool about it is if it was just that'd be one thing, and it's kind of like, okay, I feel like I'm doing the same kinds of things I'm doing in Railroad Tycoon. But I think one of the things that really makes it cool is that there's these I don't know, technologies or whatever. There are these tiles, and there's one for each number. And so one of the things you can do is use your die to grab the tile of that number, and it gives you either a static ability that you have as long as you have the tile, or a one-time use thing that you can use on a future turn and then give the tile back up. Like, for example, deliver no matter how far it is, no matter how big your engine is, or take 2 turns in a row or something like that. So these are some cool things. And one thing that's cool about this is they're double-sided, and each game you'll only use one side. So you could end up with slightly different versions or different actions that you can do. The other thing that's cool about it is when you claim one, you kind of put it sideways or whatever, and no one can take it away from you until next turn when you get a chance to use it. So you're always guaranteed to use it at least once. And then once it's in front of you and you've had it for a while, someone else can grab it from you if they try, like if they have the right numbered die. So it's kind of cool that you are guaranteed to use it. And then they're also worth a point or something. So if you have it at the end of the game, it's either worth negative points if it's like a really good one, or if it's one of the one-use ones that you took and never got to use, it's worth a point or 2. So that's some neat little behind-the-scenes like design stuff that I appreciate, is that they have all these little things like a variety of the actions you can do, and making sure you get to use the action that you've taken before someone takes it away from you, and rewarding you for having it in case you didn't get a chance to use it and stuff like that. These are all little small design things that I appreciate. And I think it's a good, quick, simple roll and write that reminds me of this game that I like a lot.
Very cool. Well, the things that you mentioned there really sound to me like it's capturing the spirit, in terms of one of the biggest difficulties that I have when planning out my routes is like trying to build efficiently, but then also I feel like so frequently I reach a point where I haven't been conscious enough of the scope of the game. And so like I've got my next turn planned out, but then my 3rd and 4th turns are like nothing's going to happen. And those games are really largely about that. And you're talking that this one has you doing that on kind of a smaller scale because you're building like kind of 1 track per turn. But then the other things that you're doing in terms of trying to get this delivery to go through sound really, really cool. So I'm very interested. I didn't think that you could that you could somehow distill that into a dice game, especially not a roll and write, because I feel kind of similarly to you do that they're kind of inconsistent. But that sounds very interesting, and I know that that's also interested some people here in our chat. So thanks for sharing about that one, Seth. And
Totally.
All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and move into TC. It looks like you've got some company there.
Yes. Kate got back from her play rehearsal. And, and we're going to discuss our review. I had a hard time picking a review this time because I actually got to play Hands in the Sea. I got to play Madeira, they're both really good games. But the biggest surprise we had was, what did we play?
Munchkin, the collectible card game.
Which was surprising because it was a very well designed game. This is a collectible card game coming from Steve Jackson's Games, designed by Eric Lane and Kevin Wilson. We managed to get a fairly cheap starter set, which was the Bard and the Wizard. And Kate managed to mop the table with me at least 3 to 4 times with this. Okay, why don't you describe how it's played a little bit?
Well, basically, it's your normal average, like Pokemon and stuff like that. You have a deck, and you choose a certain race. You have special cards from that race and special cards from a neutral deck. And basically, what you're doing is, it's a big bluffing game, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to take whatever card you want after doing some pre-game stuff. Take your card you want to use to fight. It could be a monster, or it could be like a broom. Who knows? You place it face down on the table, and you have coins. You can put as many coins as you want on the card. The other person can either run, or they can choose to fight it. Now, if you could cheat in this, which is it's odd, I know, but hear me out. You are.
I wonder how organized play is going to work with that.
I had to cheat, so you don't have to put like a monster out. Like I said, you can put a broom, and there you can either run away from that supposed dreaded monster, or you can call their cheat and make them flip the card. Now, if you choose something that's not a monster, they're just like you cheated, and you have to take a damage. Sometimes it's be a good thing with certain decks like the Thief.
Yeah, the Thief
cheating.
You want to cheat because if you get caught cheating, then you can do some pretty awesome effects because you're a thief.
And that's essential. Or you can play a monster and totally hose them over with 4 damage.
Yeah. So this game is essentially a bluffing game. So you have a deck of cards. It's a deck of 40 cards. You pick a character, which is your standard fantasy trope. You have like the warrior, which is a centaur warrior. You got a thief, a cleric, which heals. I mean, obviously, what else was in there?
There's a
wizard,
bard.
and a bard, and a ranger.
Yeah.
So you have this deck, and you have a horde, and you put cards in your horde, and how many defensive items you can put depends on the level you're at. And then you slap a card face down, and you put as much gold on as you want. It's like, okay, this is coming for you. And the other person has to decide they can run away once for free. After that, they can run away, but it costs them 2 damage. And the whole point of this game is it costs someone to lose 20 points of damage, at least in the starter sets.
Or run out of cards.
Or mill their deck.
Is more satisfying.
Yeah, it's way more satisfying. And so you can just bluff the heck out of this thing. Just like put 8 coins on this card. You think it's like a big 8 monster. They run away, take 2 damage from themselves. You're like, that was just some idiot thing that it wasn't even a monster card. It was just something I was bluffing. Now here comes a monster card. And you're like, oh crap, that's the real monster. I'm just going to only take 2 damage. You're like, actually, that wasn't the monster at all. It was another bluff card. And then, now this is the 8 one. It's like, oh god, okay, you're bluffing now. And they flip it over. It's like a big. What will you hit me with? Like a card that was like 5,742 orcs, right? Just hit me right in the face.
It was fun.
Yeah, it plays fast, and it's good. It is surprise. I took it to game night, and several people said it's better than it has any right to be. Was the comment that it was all about it. So we got the starters, which
all
is
of them?
all of them, because a neighbor actually went to NorwestCon and got a starter. We bought a starter, and then we got another starter we used for like $5. So we got like all the starters for like less than $20.
Oh.
So, and then we bought some boosters. So I wanted to see how it's a collectible card game. I wanted to see how they distribute the cards. And what's really funny, and I think this reflects the sense of humor Steve Jackson Games has, is the ultra rare cards in this game are X cards, and they are literally just alternate art cards for the common cards in the deck. And so if you have like a super rare card, it's just an alternate card for a common card you already have like 12 copies of. It's hilarious the way they distributed this distribution model for this collectible card game. We are going to get into an organized play because I've asked the store owner to get in, because apparently we are like the only people in this area who are playing this thing right now. Which is a little concerning. I really think honestly, it's probably the wrong time to bring out a collectible card game in this market where everyone's just playing quick game, getting Kickstarter, getting another game, playing another game, getting another game, and they're not investing in playing one game over and over, especially in a collectible card game format. But I can definitely recommend that if you have an opportunity to try this starter set and you have a young teenager who is past Pokemon but doesn't want to take the dive into Magic and just looking for something entertaining and fun, and we are hooked on it, and we're probably going to be playing it for a while. So that is our review of Munchkin, the collectible card game.
Well, I'm about to go for heresy here because I don't understand. I don't speak the language here. I've never played really a CCG beyond Pokemon when I was in like middle school. And when you describe this, though, it sounds to me like somewhat inspired by Android Netrunner, because you're putting down cards and it's sort of like, there's no asymmetry in it.
There's no asymmetry because Netrunner was asymmetric, but there's I can see the comparison, and it's not the constructing decks in Munchkin is really simple. You just use neutral cards, and you have to use cards that match your character class. In Android, I think there was like different, like Gen Techie. There were like different companies and different runners, and you could like really get crazy building a deck with. But, yeah. Are you done, Kate? No. Okay. So sorry, we lost an earbud. Yeah.
So she's not really. Well, Kate, thank you so much for that review of Munchkin CCG, and very, very good luck. Hopefully, things will all go well in Shrek the Musical.
Oh, yeah.
You will be premiering this Friday and Saturday night.
Yep, we'll break some legs.
Well, I definitely want to hear how it goes, because that's one that my wife, who's the assistant, she's not a head director. She's always looking, for fun musicals, and she's tossed around the idea of doing Shrek. So anyway, break a leg.
I will. You guys don't break legs.
No. I guess I don't know. Yeah, what should we say? Like break a mic in podcasting? I
Drop a mic.
Drop the mic.
Yeah, drop a mic.
Drop the mic. Yeah, drop a mic.
Yes.
I have had like mics break on me, and it's not very cool, and it's not something I really want to wish somebody. So
it's because you keep dropping them.
Yeah, that's right. So
they're a little fragile.
They definitely are, and especially now that's what all the kids do. All the kids, you're like, hand them a mic. Just the first thing that goes in their head is like, here, I'm going to say something. Hold up the mic. Drop the mic. Yo, it's like, yeah, it's not a mic you had to pay for. I had to pay for that mic. Well, I'm going to keep this rolling here and go into my review, which Seth here is probably going to have at least a little bit invested in, because I'm going to be talking about his baby and the latest expansion to it, and that is Eminent Domain. Eminent Domain, for anybody who's never played Eminent Domain before, it is a mixture of the role selection you might get from something like Puerto Rico or San Juan, or any of those games where somebody takes a role and then the entire table gets to sort of follow that role or choose to dissent in the case of Eminent Domain, where you don't have to follow. And what that sort of system is married together with a deck builder. And it uses a really creative system of taking an action that's based on cards in your hand. So you have to sort of spend a card to get an action. And then after that, you will actually get to choose whatever role you want to, and that will contribute to how you're building your deck. You can add special super awesome cards by doing research. And then you're going to be working towards colonizing planets by adding these cards that allow you to colonize a planet. A lot of it is like trying to sort of build up to get points through colonizing planets. Every planet is usually worth points. You can also produce and trade to get victory points. So kind of familiar things if you've ever played Race for the Galaxy, but then marry together with a deck builder that allows you to really choose some unique strategies, and one that more than anything else emphasizes player control. You're not going to be discarding your cards unless you want to at the end of rounds. So there's just tons and tons of control. And by the time that I'm like 2 or 3 rounds into a game of Eminent Domain, I am miserable because of how inadequate I am at building my deck. I'm always like looking at my hand and like, I wanted to do something and this doesn't get me there. What is wrong with me? What have I done? And Seth, you might not know me, but that to me is a really great thing. So whenever I look at this and think, what mess have I made for myself? That tells me I've got the control that I'm looking for, and the game has the depth that makes me think I really could play this better if I kept playing it. And I have given Eminent Domain quite a few shots. Now, it is a game that I would say I would really rather play it with this expansion, now that I've played a few games, than to play with, to play based Eminent Domain without the expansion just feels kind of like it's not something I'd be willing to go back and do, kind of like Base Dominion in a way. And that's because the expansion's really fleshed out I would say different strategies and the sort of strategies within strategies, because Eminent Domain itself had sort of 4 or 5 really base strategies. And I would say that even when you narrow it down, you've got 4 or 5 things you could do that really kind of condense down into 2 or 3 strategies where there's some sort of like supplementary actions that you would take to supplement your base strategy of either going for colonizing or for warfare. And you at least have to do a certain amount of one of those 2 to be able to get yourself to the point where you can actually do all that much research or producing and trading. So it's kind of like, it's sort of like 2 times 2, so maybe 4 different strategies. But then you really get strategies within strategies when you add the first expansion of Escalation, which really just blew everything up and really made it that sort of game that Eminent Domain has a weird quality of every time I ever put it out on the table, it almost never gets played once. It's always like you play that, and then the biggest complaint I've ever had new players say is like, is it seriously going to end? Like, I'm just getting started. I'm just getting this going, and it's going to be over? Are you kidding me? Like, I just got this. I'm never going to get this planet to go. I didn't know it was going to be this fast. It's like, and that to me is a huge compliment to the game as well. Like, it's rare that I get done with a game and think, I wish this game had been just a little bit longer. I wish I'd just been able to get a little bit more done. And it's got that sort of one more time feeling. And I know there's variants in there that you can add to maybe give you that extra couple of turns to get more stuff done. But it's really, really cool to see how that works out. Now, Escalation, the first expansion, just blew the strategies up. It sort of required you to have like this tech tree of all the different techs in the game. Very cool that way. And in a large way, I feel like Eminent Domain plus its Escalation expansion should be marketed together as the base game.
Yeah, there's no way I would play Eminent Domain without Escalation, just because I remember when I first played Eminent Domain, like, oh, I got all these ships, and they're different. They got different size ships, they got all these different things, and they were just like, they all did the same thing. But Escalation actually makes those different ships do different things. And at that point, I'm like, yeah, I am never playing Eminent Domain without Escalation at this point.
Mm-hmm. And it just added more like an action you could take, because usually your actions required you to spend a card, which then kind of like made your turn just slightly less. You know, it's like you were using a card. I mean, you were reduced hand size. You know, which, I mean, it's still like a lot of the actions were really, really beneficial. But it was just really cool to see how Escalation, like TC said, gave you so much stuff that you could do within. You know, that it made the different plastic pieces mean something.
Seth, Seth, I want to ask him a question about Eminent Domain. When you published that game, I heard that the ship pieces were just like ships that were just on hand somewhere. You just threw them in there, and you had no intention of actually using the different size ships or anything. And that was part of the Escalation expansion. It's like, oh, they're already in the best game. We can like differentiate them. Is that true or not?
So pretty close. The story there is this. So yeah, you're pretty close. So we made Eminent Domain. It was on Kickstarter. It was one of the first big games on Kickstarter, right? And we were gonna use just like wooden discs or whatever, like black wooden discs, like the resources for the fighters. But we were doing real well on Kickstarter, and you know this was before Kickstarter was so big that people were raking in 6-figure projects, right? We were looking for $20,000, which was 5 times more or something like that than. I don't know, 5 times. It was a lot more than previous. There weren't any previous games. There was one there was Alien Frontiers was the only big game before us, and there were a couple smaller ones. That there was a game that was looking for $5,000 in funding, and they barely funded. I think Alien Frontiers was looking for like 15,000. Yeah, they were looking for like 15,000, and that was like a game that people like noticed. And then we were looking for 20,000. We ended up funding for like 48,000. So like this is like huge. At the time, nowadays it's like the smallest Kickstarter you can think of.
£2 million. Yeah.
But the point is, we were doing so well that we were like, hey, what if we could find something cooler to use for these ships in the game? And I contacted a guy who had done a game called Galactic Emperor, I think it's called. And he had plastic ships in his game. And I said, hey, I see that you've got plastic ships in your game. I'm wondering if I can like use your mold. Could I to make plastic ships for my game? And then we'd pay you a little bit of money. Because I guess we couldn't afford or didn't think we could afford to make a new mold, because making molds is like a couple $1,000s. Yeah. So we weren't going to do that. But on the off chance that this guy would let me use his mold, I thought, well, maybe we can get plastic ships. That'd be awesome. And he said, yeah, that's cool. And we made an agreement to like use his mold. But the problem ended up being that the mold, one impression of the mold had 4 small, 2 medium, and 1 large ship. Okay. So I was like, well, we don't really need 3 sizes of ships. We only need 1 size of ship. So I was like, can we cover up those other ones or something? So we only get the small ones, and, or, you know, and I was told at the time by the manufacturer that either wasn't practical or wasn't good for some reason. We shouldn't do it. Another option was to like print them all and then just use the small ones and just throw the other ones away or something. That's super wasteful. So we decided, okay, well, we'll have different size ships. And one idea was like saying, hey, what if these were 1s, 3s, and 5s, like denominations? Yeah. And I was like, well, I mean, you probably don't need that. But more importantly, I was thinking, man, if we're going to have different size ships, maybe I could find a way for that to matter in an expansion. I had no idea how at the time. I was like, I had no expansion plans yet. But I'm like, maybe that's something I could use to like figure out it's something to do within the expansion. So because I had that thought, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to assign a value to this medium ship that it means, 3 little ships, and then later say, no, it doesn't. It actually means something. So I said, you know what? I'm going to reserve that right for my, maybe I'll be able to use that in expansion. It gives me something to think about. We'll just give these ships to people and they can play with the different ships like and it won't be a big deal. Mike and I thought, it won't be they can play with the toys. It'll be fun. and they'll all be worth 1, and that's not a big deal. Nobody will have a problem with that, right? And as you could probably guess at this point in the story, that anytime you think nobody will have a problem with something, of course everybody's going to have a problem with something. So it turns out some people were fine with that, and they're like, okay, I wonder why there's different size ships, but whatever. But some people were like, went as far as to say, there were comments online saying, this game is obviously unfinished because they gave me 3 size ships and they all mean the same thing. Like, this game's obviously not done.
And then people were complaining they're the same ships from Eclipse. They're like, the rumor mill just flew off, man.
Yeah. Well, later people did say, oh, they just reused the ships from Eclipse, which is funny when you consider that Eclipse came out well after Eminent Domain came out. In fact, what we did was we used the same size ship or the same ships as Galactic Emperor, but nobody notices that because I guess Galactic Emperor didn't.
It's just not. Yeah, it's not Eclipse. Eclipse is Eclipse Galactic Emperor.
Apparently, yeah. So it's kind of funny to hear people talk about stuff when they don't know the history. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you just copied Eclipse with these ships," and I'm like, "Yeah, we copied them first."
we copied them.
But anyway, it's fine. Whatever. I mean, I don't care that Eclipse used the same ships. I'm not. I mean, I use someone else's ships. Why shouldn't someone else use my ships? I'm not sure how that happened. I felt a little bad because I think the Galactic Emperor guy, I think he had a similar thought as I did. I wanted to use the 1 size ship. When I ended up using 3 sizes of ships, he was like, I didn't expect you to be using all 3 model sizes or whatever. And so that was like a little iffy because like we'd made an agreement for 1, but I was like, there's only 1 mold and there's not, there's literally nothing I can do about it. So I felt a little bad that we had a miscommunication there, but in the end, we ended up with 3 sizes of ships. They all meant the same thing. The only reason we had them is because we thought it'd be cooler than having wood, and we didn't want to pay for a mold, for our own mold. So that's why there's 3 sizes of ships. However, I was very happy when it came time to work on an expansion that I had something to work with, and I'm very happy with what I came up with, I think, for Escalation, in order to use those ships as, to assign meaning to them. And for people who thought the game was unfinished because the entirely finished game in production ended up having 3 different sized ships, more power to you. Maybe you'll play with Escalation and you'll be happy.
Yeah, for sure. So Escalation, then, yes, as Seth has said, really finally finished this unfinished game. And then there was an expansion that came out called Exotica, and I actually never got a chance to play Exotica until the game that I'm actually quote unquote reviewing here, which is called Oblivion, the newest expansion. So I played Oblivion and Exotica together, and actually, Seth, you go ahead and correct me if I say something is part of Oblivion when it's actually part of Exotica.
Sure.
But from what I can remember, Exotica comes with like new types of planets for you to colonize that are like asteroids, and it also comes with a new type of planet that is like an alien sort of planet. It's basically just an extra icon that keys off of other cards or other like powers. So it's one of those things that doesn't mean necessarily anything all by itself, but almost immediately you'll find like that there's a lot of those planets, and there's a lot of planets that do something where they either utilize those planets or give you points for those planets or any number of things. So from what I remember, it was more of a more stuff expansion. It did have a couple of new things, but they tended to sort of be self-referential more so than expanding and widening out the game. Those asteroids could be colonized with an extra action of discarding your entire hand. A bold move, Cotton. But that is from what I gathered, that is Exotica. Did I miss anything there, Seth?
That's pretty much exactly right. The exotic planets were planets with alien, friendly alien life, and so they have these symbols that you can't use unless you can translate them. And then there's some technology and some planets that have translators, which let you use the. So the cool thing is that the exotic icon, which does nothing by itself, like you said, could be translated into multiple different things if you have the right translators. So. All by itself, it's nothing. With the translator, it can be whatever you translate it to, but with multiple translators, it can be a very flexible thing. So kind of like snowballs. And then the asteroids, they're supposed to be they're kind of like bad planets. They kind of choke up the planet deck, and they're mediocre. They're not great. unless you prepare for them and get the right technologies, and then you can kind of make a strategy out of it where you're like, oh, I get to keep a regular planet and an asteroid, or oh, I get to get a benefit every time I flip an asteroid over and stuff like that. So you can mine asteroids and I did like that that alternate way you mentioned of flipping an asteroid over, which is discarding your hand. It's interesting to me because if you do that as your action, then you have no hand and your roll phase is potentially poor because you can't boost your roll. And that's kind of neat to me because you can do it if you, depending on what role you're picking, if you maybe you don't have cards to boost it anyway, or maybe you don't need to boost it, but you can so you can be like, oh, this is an opportunity. I can free flip my planet because I don't care about my cards. Or if you happen to
surveys,
right, or if you have like you followed all your opponents and you have a very little small hand anyway, and you're like, all right, I'll discard my 2 cards remaining to like flip my planet over for free, or my asteroid over, and then take some other role, whatever that you didn't, maybe you survey or something like that.
Yeah, and maybe just build based on what you actually should put in your deck and not just the action you want to take, which is always my mistake. So
that is the key. That is the key of Eminence Domain is you want the action, but you've got the long-term consequence of having a particular card in your deck now.
And really, that's the beauty of it. Having something like a persistent remnant of a choice that you made in an earlier round, to me, it's what really gives Eminent Domain this crunchiness that you don't necessarily see even in other deck builders, especially in other deck builders. But I mean, it's just, the fact that you maybe made a decision based on that role is a really interesting balance that is what keeps me always interested and intrigued by what's coming out of the design team behind Eminent Domain. So I still haven't got to my review. So I guess I've kind of done, you did 1.5 reviews. I guess I'm doing like what would it be? 1 review and then like a half and then a half and then another whole. I don't know. I'm getting a bunch in here. It's just piecemealing it out. And finally, we're now getting to Oblivion. And what Oblivion does is adds, there are cards in the base game that are called politics cards. And for your action that you only get 1 of each round, you can turn a politics card into any other card. And this is going to help you boost another action. So it can be really helpful, but you're also just really blowing an action here. And these politics cards don't really have another use. You kind of want to use them immediately so that you can turn them into something that'll be more useful for you in the future. Otherwise, they keep coming up in your deck. You start the game with a small deck of cards that is fairly well distributed among all the available strategies, all the available roles you can take in the game. And then when you get rid of your politics cards, usually, you just kind of forget that they even existed. And you just remember, oh, yeah, those are like starting cards. You always think of them as starting cards. And I think that maybe, Seth, what you wanted to do in Eminent Domain Oblivion was to get players to think about these politics cards as more than just starting roles. And instead, you have politics being a veritable strategy where you can take agendas. And what you're seeing these agendas is like, it'd be like extra rules essentially added to the game where you're making it now so that it'll be more expensive to colonize planets or cheaper to colonize planets or cheaper to colonize asteroids, or you get points for a certain thing at the end of every round. At the end of the game, whoever has the most of something gets certain points. It's all sorts of different persistent effects that will stay in play until a player sort of votes them down by putting them in the agenda that then causes it to be, essentially, you can either use these politics cards and take a politics role, which is actually a role now. It was not a role that you could take previously, and you couldn't actually add any cards to your deck that said politics on it. Like I said, it's just like starting cards. Now you can actually add these to your deck, and when you do that, you'll take a role where you vote in an agenda. And this is really the thing that makes Eminent Domain really spread into what I think is uncharted territory. It's the final frontier now. And Jeff Gamble of the Longview, when I had a recent conversation with him, he wanted to prep me as well. So I'm hearing all kinds of voices here. I'm hearing Trent, I'm hearing Jeff. And what Jeff had to say was that he really loves the cooperation that you see among players to either together pass an initiative, an agenda to get something to happen. And that's because players get rewarded if they participate in making an agenda by getting to draw these, what they call clout tokens, which are kind of like having a card that sits in front of you that you can use whenever you want to. And then once you use it, it's gone. It's like a persistent token. So you can sometimes just, use these politics cards for that, for just like, getting these clout tokens, which will help you make other actions more beneficial. Or you can use them to really like try to, oh, that guy's getting a point every single turn from what he's doing. We need to work together to stop this from happening. This cannot be a thing. And so it turns into something where players are actually sort of politicking around, and I'm not just trying to borrow from the game. It's like really you're interacting with other players as sort of a Galactic Council sort of environment. And that's something that I really think pushed this not only into Jeff's territory, but definitely into Trent. Trent loves to turn every game into a game of diplomacy. And that's basically what Oblivion looks to do, but also by adding strategies, adding cards that are technologies, as you mentioned, technologies that validate a politics strategy for allowing you to do several other aspects like colonizing planets and getting points in other ways throughout the game. So really, this is the fleshing out of the politics role and what I would call a necessary expansion. If you're going to play Eminent Domain, definitely play it with Escalation and with Oblivion. Exotica, if you're feeling like you want to play the tropical fruit mix, but like I said, I've never played Oblivion without Exotica, but it definitely did feel like something that was a little bit different. So maybe something to show new players, maybe not, but then something to later on when players understand that, like, hey, this is how many exotic planets are in here. This is what exotic planets can do. So you know what you're getting into. So that way you don't end up like choosing an asteroid and then being like, what does this do? Or what does this symbol do? Oh, I should have chosen something else. So anyway, my overall feeling is that Oblivion pushes it into a new direction that in my experience with people who really like Eminent Domain, they're looking for something super crunchy, and then it pushes them to play the players as much as they're playing the game, which is certainly already a part of Eminent Domain just by its following and leading, by taking a role in following, but really starts to make these persistent effects that you'll remember and be working together. It starts to create that storytelling platform that Jeff Gamble really is looking for, in terms of like, he remembers that this agenda came out and it's like, we had to work together to shoot that thing down. That couldn't happen. So I don't have much experience with Oblivion, but I thought it was really cool when I played it. And I do really like what it's done with politics and making it something that's more than just a starting card that you get rid of as soon as you can.
Well, that's cool. I really like to hear that, because that's, what I was going for. A little inside baseball. So you could look at Eminent Domain as kind of a Twilight Imperium card game. Like, that's kind of the inspiration. Was I actually was talking to Michael and I said he loved Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, and he used to make us all go to his house and play it all day on his birthday every year. And I like the idea. I like the idea of Twilight Imperium, but I don't like to play Twilight Imperium because it takes so long and it's so much work, and it doesn't seem as fun as just the idea of having a big Space Empire like game or whatever. So one time I was talking to Mike and I said, it'd be cool if there was a Twilight Imperium card game, like a I don't know, card game version. And he said, why don't you make one? And I was like, huh. So I thought about that, and that's kind of why I started with Eminent Domain as a role selection game, because Twilight Imperium's a role selection game, as you might notice, and that's why I started with the space theme as well. So as such, those politics cards were in the base game, partly for a mechanical reason. I wanted a way to players to have like a way to customize their starting deck a little bit without actually customize, without starting with the same deck, but still having some customization. However, I also just wanted to have some aspect of politics to kind of fill out the 4X or the whole Twilight Imperium thing. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it because the game was working well, and I didn't want to overcomplicate it with stuff. So I didn't make like a politics like branch of the game. But I needed a little wild card, and I'm like, oh, politics, that fits, and this will fit the theme as well. Then when it came time to work on expansion and stuff, one of the things I'm like, what could I add? Well, I could add a planet type. I did that in Exotica. It adds planet types. I could add just more technologies and stuff like that, and that's what I did basically. I could differentiate those ships like I was talking about, which is what I did in Escalation. And then I'm like, well, what else could I do? Well, I could add a role to the game. What else could I? How else could I expand this game? And I'm like, well, I've got these politics cards. What if politics was a role? And what would that mean? What does it mean to do politics in a space, a galactic Senate type of thing? And the one of the things that inspired me for that was, you ever played a game called Warrior Knights?
Oh wow, that's an old Fantasy Flight game. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a game called Warrior Knights, and I liked how they did politics in that game. And I can't remember right now. I can't remember all the details of it, but there was basically like these proposals or whatever, and you'd vote on them by spending your influence tokens or whatever, and you vote for it or against it, and then whether it had more fors or against or whatever, it came into play or it didn't. Stuff like that. And so that was kind of where I started, and I went through a number of iterations of how the politics system could work, and all of them though were basically trying to get these global effects, these agendas that affect everybody, into and out of play in some collaborative manner where players could work. The goal was to get players to work together to get these things into or out of play. And why would you do that? Why would you help someone else get something in play? Well, as you mentioned, maybe there's one that gives a point if you have the most fertile planets, and you and I have the same number of fertile planets, so it helps both of us. So we're both going to leech some points every turn. So you might help me get that into play because it helps us both. And then once it's in play, maybe a third player wants to get it out of play because they're not getting points. Or now that it's in play, maybe I want to really get an extra fertile planet so I keep getting the benefit and you don't. Stuff like that. So I wanted that to be the dynamic, and it took me a couple of tries to figure out a method to get that working correctly. And I'm really kind of happy with what I ended up with. Basically, the way it works is it's a role like other roles, but it's a little bit different. In most of the game's roles, you choose the role, you boost it, you resolve it, and you're done, and then other players can do the same. This one's a little bit different. You choose the role, and you make a proposal. You say, I want to get this agenda in play or whatever. And then everyone else, so instead of boosting it first, everyone else boosts it first, or follows it rather. And instead of them doing it on their own, what they're doing is they're lending you their political support. They're saying, I'm playing my politics icons for you to use. And in return, they're getting these clout tokens, which is like these tokens you could describe that have role icons on them they can spend later. So they get rewarded for giving me their votes, but they don't have to give me their votes. So instead of having a vote for, vote against situation, it's just like, can I gather enough votes to get this thing in? And if I can, then I do. And you can help me. I can say, hey, this is good for you. You should totally play some politics icons. And in return, you get these clout tokens that you'll use later. So you could have people that don't care and they just want the clout tokens. You can have people that really want to help you, and so they'll play whatever they can. And you can have people that might like the clout tokens but don't want to play any symbols because they don't want this thing in play that you're proposing. And there's even a way I tried to make it so, like, what happens if you don't get enough votes? Can you just do nothing? That would be disappointing. So there's this little extra dynamic where it's like, if you get enough votes, you have to do what you said, what you proposed. If you got more than enough votes, you could do something else also. And if you got less than enough votes, you could do something else, but at a cost of it costs a little more than normal. But if you can still afford it, then you could. So you could like maybe try to fake people out a little bit. You could be like, oh, let's do this expensive thing together. And maybe other people think, oh, well, I'll put some into that. I don't mind if that comes in play. And you don't quite get enough votes, then you can do the thing you really wanted to do. And it's like a surprise. You know, there are nifty little politics tricks you can actually do that I've actually heard people talk about doing. And I like
this kind of politics, like that's almost like backstabbing. It's like, oh, we can't do that. That's too bad because now we can do this thing. And
yeah, I mean, in a way, and I'm not sure how common that'll end up being that people will really do that. But the main effect though is getting these things into play. And if you have enough politics, you don't need anyone's help. You can say, I want that in play. I've got enough symbols. I'm going to get it in play. And if you've got enough symbols, then you might find that other people are playing symbols because you're gonna succeed anyway. They're gonna get their clout tokens, and then you find that you've got all these extra symbols. So maybe you do a second thing, you know. So there's all kinds of neat dynamics. But the crux of it is that it I think I'm happy with how it worked out. It does get people to either work together or deal with these global agendas that affect everybody in a way that matters. I'm glad I persevered because the first few iterations didn't really work properly, and even the last one, like, it worked, but there was not a lot of incentive to want to be the one that calls the roll. So the last thing I added was, whenever you choose an agenda and try to get it in play, you get a little bit of a benefit. Either you get to choose, if it's an agenda that says you get extra points for trading water, for example, you get to choose that it's water instead of iron, or you get a little benefit, like immediate benefit, and then this global effect is in play and stuff like that, which I think was key, because without that, you have these agendas and stuff, and it's like I'd like that in play, but I don't want to spend my turn getting into play to help you. You know,
you need
there was too much of that. Yeah,
some sort of an incentive that's an immediate benefit.
Right. So I'm really happy with how that actually turned out, and I'm hearing reports of I'm reading some session reports online, and I'm like, this one guy, I don't know who it is, somebody on Board Game Geek, he's posted 2 session reports now, and I just read through his. It's just like, that's exactly what I wanted to do. That worked exactly how I had it in mind. So it really is reassuring, because I never know. You never know. The game comes out and people play it, and you never know what's going to happen. So it's definitely been good so far in seeing that people are playing the game. It's panning out just how I wanted it to.
That's really awesome, because there's a difference, sometimes between like sometimes there's a game that's super, super popular, and it's like, it's popular, but not for the reason the designer intended. It's like, this captures a certain audience, and maybe the designer, it was kind of like, just coincidental that there was an audience for this type of a game, even though it's not what the designer's looking for. Here, what you're seeing is exactly what you wanted to happen is happening. And now I would say that with what you were going for in politics, it's very intriguing to me, and I think there are things there for anybody, but I do think that like the idea of like global agendas and working together is not something that everybody's looking for, and it's definitely not something that Eminent Domain had going for it before. So it could be offering something that not every player specifically wants, but I think it's definitely something that even if you don't want that, which is kind of the central concept, there's still some cool stuff here in terms of making that politics role actually matter, because you can have politics where you can actually colonize some planets via just by politics, right? I mean, there's some situations you can get to where you get technologies where you can get it all to kind of click together and really make it beneficial for you.
Yeah, there's some stuff you can do. There's like a translator for politics icons that you can probably get, and then there's the new planets in the set. So it turns out that those prestige planets that if people have played before, there's these prestige planets used to be just big VP and no other benefit. They don't help you get technology and whatever. So it turns out the prestige planets are like the political hubs of the universe. So like your Coruscant or whatever. So the new set with the politics in it has a couple planets, but they're all politics. They're all prestige planets, and there's all the technology is prestige tech. So you have to have prestige planets to get it, and it's all related to the politics role and the agendas and things like that, and the clout tokens, and so that's all there. It's all kind of works together. And one of the cool things about Eminent Domain is there are lots of different things you can do. And if you're not interested in politics, you don't have to participate, right? You can just ignore it. You actually, because it's politics centered, in this expansion, you actually start with a second politics card in your starting deck. So you've got 2. Well, you can just flip those into other cards in the first couple of turns and then just ignore politics. Maybe someone else puts an agenda in play that you have to deal with. Maybe you don't care. But you can just do other things. Or you can go the opposite way and get a lot of politics, so you can kind of have some control over these agendas, and even and try to get the ones in play that help you and stuff like that. Or you can kind of go a mid-ground where you don't necessarily dictate what gets into play, but if you see that someone puts something into play, you can alter your play to make use of it. You put something in play that says that you can get an extra point whenever you trade water. Maybe I'll use my political influence tile standard action that changes my iron on my metallic planet. I can use an action to turn that into water, and then later I can turn that water into 2 points or whatever.
I forgot to mention another cool thing. As an action, if you have nothing you want to do as an action, you now have a cool action to take where you just get a clout token. So I mean, like, that by itself is just like something that's like, you have nothing else you want to do? Okay, here you go, grab the bag.
Yeah, then that's basically like drawing a card, except for it's not a card that was in your deck, so it's not necessarily one that'll be useful. But all those cloud tokens have politics on one side and some other role on the other. So if you're getting a clout token, you can use it for a politics role if you want, but maybe you'll like what's on the other side. Oh, I got a research icon. Great, I can do some research now. Or, oh, I've got a warfare icon, but I don't really want to attack a planet, so maybe I'll use that one for something else. So I really like how it all came together, and I was hesitant. I was nervous because I didn't know if people that play Eminent Domain, I don't know if they wanted, like you said, I don't know if they were interested in sort of a negotiation. It's not really. It's like a regulated negotiation. It's not really an open negotiation thing, but it's a way to have a negotiated political aspect in the game. And I was nervous because I didn't know if people that were players of Eminent Domain would be interested in that. But I think it comes across in a way that works well in the game. And
Yes.
you know, I'm sure not everyone's going to love it to pieces, but like I think it works well, and I think some people will like it. And I'm liking so far the reports I'm seeing that people are digging it.
Yeah,
So that's good.
and I think so too, Seth. I really do feel like, you know, there are pieces here for anybody, and for me personally, I think it's really cool what you've done. Now, I do kind of want to go to something Trent said, which is that he really wants to see scenarios. He wants like more scenarios, because something that came out in Escalation was that you had like sort of scenarios where it's like a starting card that you got, and then you usually get like 2 of them dealt to you, and they would be a certain amount of starting technologies and starting planets maybe, and you know, just different sort of starting resources and deck compositions to sort of make it so that every player was starting from a very unique and is almost like variable player powers, but taken up to steroids. It was like the game was playing 3 to 4 rounds for you, and then you were sort of picking up, and then the game went the same amount of time. And what was cool about that, I thought, was that, you know, getting to see what it's like to start from, you know, round 3 and getting to sort of play it out to like, you know, till it gets to round 10, as opposed to the normal game, which seems like it starts at 1 and gets to about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, you know, somewhere in there. It's like you get to go a little bit further because the game clock isn't really starting to tick out, and you're already getting like these kind of, you know, powerful cards that allow you some pretty cool actions. Now, I'm still not exactly sure, because it's like, to what extent did those choose what I did in the game, and not so much the other way around, where I chose what was happening. It was like I was more trying to maximize a decision that was prior made. But what I would be really interested in is whether or not scenarios were ever in the pipe for Oblivion, and just, you know, like, is there like, did you have any thought of starting with maybe like a few starting agendas that were already in play, and then let players sort of like see what, with these 3 starting agendas, what are you going to do?
So here's the background on this scenarios. So scenarios seems like it's everybody's favorite part of Escalation, and that's kind of funny to me, because here's how they were almost like an afterthought. They were like a
Stretch goal.
Yeah, well, no, they weren't a stretch goal. They weren't going to exist though. I mean, I didn't have any. I didn't think of them and think this would be a great thing to add. Here's how they came to be. At the time, I lived in a house, and I had a tenant / roommate that really liked Eminent Domain, and he played a lot with me. His name is John, and I'm really glad that he liked it so much, because that helped me, you know, keep playing it and keep playtesting. And he we would play, and we'd play a 2-player game, and we'd, you know, finish, and we'd pack it up, and he'd say, "Hey, you want to play again?" And he would conspicuously have left Fertile Ground in play on his side, like I wasn't going to notice that the strongest card in the game is sitting there already in play, right? And he was just jokingly doing that, and I was like, "All right, but if you're going to start with that in play, I'm going to start with this in play." And he was like, "Okay," and I was like, "All right." So we jokingly kind of tried it. So he started with, I don't know, Fertile Ground in play, and I started with Scorched Earth Policy or something like that in play. And so we played it out, and we're like, well, that was kind of fun. And we started like trying other matchups. Well, what if you started with this level 2 tech and I started with this level 2 tech? And we were enjoying it. We're like, oh, it's kind of fun. And so we ended up making those scenarios, and that's basically what it is. You would, and I kind of fleshed them out. You basically start with a level 2 tech, or maybe a couple level 1 techs or something like that. You start with a unique starting deck, and I started tweaking them to be like, oh, well, let's see. This one, you know, Scorched Earth Policy is useful if you're doing warfare, so let's give you 1 less colonized card and 1 more warfare card to start with, or, you know, something like that. And then they get maybe a specific start planet too. And since it was the expansion, I could use the expansion start planets as well, so I could kind of do it that way. And some of them start with like a random original start planet, or one of the new start planets that is a certain type or whatever. So it gave everybody a unique starting point, an asymmetric start. And to be honest, and this, you know, I don't love games that have asymmetric starts. I prefer games like, I mean, I loved Puerto Rico, and I played that to death. And that's got an asymmetric start, but like barely. Like I start with a cornfield, and you start with an indigo field or whatever.
I guess.
So to be honest, I didn't like playing with scenarios. I mean, I liked them. I liked that they were fun and it was neat and whatever. And I thought, okay, this could be in the game, but I never used them. I mean, except to test them. I don't use them now. But it turned out they were super popular and everyone loved them. And I actually there's a guy in Seattle. His name is Mike, Mike Watney, who did a whole lot of testing for me to like test all these scenarios. He and his, I don't know, wife, maybe his girlfriend at the time, played a ton with all these scenarios, and he did a lot of testing for me to test the balance of these different scenarios, and he'd help me out with that a lot. And I did some testing as well, and so I got this set of scenarios, and I'm like, all right, sure, I'll include them. I didn't think it was that big a deal. And then the game comes out, and it's everyone's favorite part because everyone likes asymmetric starts, and they want more. And then the Escalation came out, and I mean, Exotica came out next, and I put some scenarios in there too because they were so popular in Escalation. But to be honest, I was like running out of steam on these scenarios because I don't like them that much. Like,
no,
to tell
you don't
truth.
play with them. It is kind of like it takes some of that decision out of it, but it really does, like players that are, especially when you're learning it, it's like, ooh, I want to keep playing until I've played with every one of the scenarios and just, keep on like
I see the benefits. Yeah, I see the attraction. I see the benefits, and it was fun to make them up, and it was fun to test them. But I don't know. It was tough to keep the motivation to make more when I didn't really. I prefer the game.
You don't play the game that way, and you've played more Eminent Domain than anybody else. So yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm most proud of is I've played the base game of Eminent Domain with no expansions over 400 times probably. And sure, I'm biased, right? But even considering that I'm biased, that's a lot of games of Eminent Domain, and I'm not sick of it. I can play base game Eminent Domain all day long, and sure, play with Escalation, and it opens stuff up with a whole bunch more options and a whole bunch more strategies. You play with Exotica, and it gives you more strategies. You can try to go heavily into asteroids or into exotic planets or whatever. And there's all these things. And this is why I always recommend to people, first of all, I recommend playing the base game a bunch before adding any expansions. Because I think if you add an expansion right away, you're missing out on exploring the base game by itself, and now you're just exploring the expansion. And like I said, I mean, if I can play 400 times without an expansion, I'm pretty sure other people can play a dozen times without an expansion without getting bored. And then I further say, I remember the first time I played with both Exotica and Escalation together, and I had played a ton of each of those things separately, and I put them together, and I was overwhelmed at first. And I was like, holy crap, there are so many stuff, so many ways to go, so many cards, so much stuff. And I was like, it was neat because I hadn't been it'd been a long time since I'd been like a wash of like new strategic options because I'd played so much. So that was cool, but I can't imagine someone playing for the first time and someone saying, hey, I'm going to teach you this game and I'm going to throw in all the expansions. Like that is, I feel like that's not the best way to go. So I always recommend, and I know people aren't necessarily going to do this because it's just not necessarily feasible, but I think the best way to experience Eminent Domain is to play the base game by itself a bunch until you're like super familiar with it and stuff like that. Then add one expansion, maybe Escalation. Play that a bunch, and there's a lot of game there that you can play. It's all these scenarios, all these different strategic options, all these different texts that you can explore. And then take that out and play with Exotica all by itself a bunch. And then you can explore you can look for your asteroid strategies, you can look for your alien strategies, you can look to splash those things and whatever. And then once you're familiar with each of those ways, then combine them, because you won't have to be like, what does this tech do? Because you've already learned that. And you can look for the ways to combine these things. And I included in each set, I included like what I call a promo pack, which is for use when combining the expansions. So like Exotica had a promo pack that you would only use if you're also playing with Escalation. And it's stuff that makes sense with Escalation and Exotica together. Like, a hostile exotic planet, for example, which is hostile planets are from Escalation, exotic planets are from Exotica. So there's a little bit of stuff that you would add to kind of combine them, because I expected this would happen. And I've made these expansions to combine together. And with Oblivion, it's kind of the same thing. I would recommend playing with just Oblivion by itself, so you can explore these agendas and stuff before you've combined it with Exotica. That's not so bad, because Exotica is not so earth-shattering, I guess. It's not so big. It's got two big main aspects, and you can kind of like keep that in mind, I guess. And you can also play with agendas.
And it's more when they come up that you can decide whether or not to go with them. It's not like they're things that are like you've got to keep in mind. It's, if you get one of these planets, you just kind of roll with it.
You could. Yeah, Escalation's got a lot more different things you can kind of do and a lot more technologies.
Text, yeah.
In retrospect, I kind of wish I'd put less technology in Escalation because I just feel like I overdid it. Like I didn't save anything back for future expansions. I just
so much. Yes, that's why Escalation is such a huge expansion.
Yeah, and when it came time to do Exotica, I was like, well, I already put so much tech in a Escalation. I didn't really want to add a whole lot more, so I just added a couple, and then the one tech stack for the exotic tech stack. So you have this new planet type, so there's techs that go with that, and then you got asteroids. So there's a couple of techs that go with that in each stack, and I didn't want to add too much. And then when it came time for Oblivion, I almost didn't add any tech. I was thinking, you know what? There's so much tech. Maybe the agendas are like technologies, and maybe I'll just have agendas. And then in the end, I decided I added all these prestige planets, and I didn't have any prestige tech yet. And I'm like, all right, I'll add a tech. I'll try not to add too much, and I'll put it all in the prestige stack. So at least it's a separate stack. So it's like, it's not adding to the stacks that already exist, because it was a real problem for me that like there was just too much technology.
Huh.
So
well, Seth, I have a question for you. Where do you find, because your job as a designer is also very much married to your job as a game publisher. I mean, you're like one of the founding members of a game publishing company. And the thing is, like, wherein does your role as a player and what your preference is sometimes get, like, does this sometimes make it difficult for you to make the prudent business decision? Because here's the thing, dude, I wonder how many people looked at Oblivion and saw, okay, well, here's all this new stuff. I don't trust that new stuff. What I do trust is text, and it needs to come with text. If it comes with text, I'll buy it. If it doesn't come with text, I ain't buying it because I don't trust his new thing. Like, his new thing is something totally different. It could take the game in a direction I'm not interested in. But the text, I know that I'm going to be able to use those. And so what are you trying to do as a gamer who also designs games and plays your own designs and plays them in a way that you want? I know for a fact, Seth, that there are a lot of people out there who really want to play Eminent Domain only with an expansion. Like, it's like the base game.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to say that it isn't for you at 400 games, but I know for a fact that like other people's, that another, like an alternative way into sort of familiarizing yourself with all the text, which you've got a buttload of text in this game, and there are so many of them, and they're all available theoretically from the start of the game. You can get any of these texts. None of them are like off limits because of random. There's no randomness that limits the amount of tech in this game. What a lot of people, I think, enjoy doing to explore different avenues is those scenarios. And that's why they're so popular, because it's like a lot of people will never get to that level 5 card, or when they finally get it, they never get to use it. And you get to really kind of like be like, oh, really? So I can use this in this situation. So like that's kind of a way to explore that tech tree, but it's kind of like doing it in a way where you're sort of having it spoon fed to you. And that's, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. And I understand, like I said, I understand why people like the scenarios. And I think it's actually, I'm really happy that I have them in there, because I think it is a big deal. And I think it is really good. And I definitely understand, once you've played with an expansion, going back to the base game by itself wouldn't be as exciting. I can totally understand that too. But
or maybe you have the knowledge to make it exciting now that it's like, oh, we can pull all these things back that we think are the meta and then see what happens. So it could be interesting, but yeah.
One thing I did to mix it up a little bit at a convention was I ran an event that was like a Eminent Domain tournament, but I called it an Eminent Domain Legacy Tournament. And this was interesting, I thought. And it worked out pretty well for the players. So you play the first round normal. You play Eminent Domain. It was I think there was no expansions. It was just a base game. And then you keep track at the end of the game of your deck. You look at whichever card type you had the most of, card type or types that you had the most of. Next game, you'll start with +1 card of that type in your deck. And whatever type you had the least of, you would start with -1. And, the idea being that if your deck was, I don't know, research heavy, then you'll start next game with a research, like a head start in research. But if you didn't do any warfare, you'll start without any warfare cards. Like if you didn't, and you wouldn't count anything with 0. So then the second round, you do that again. So maybe after 2 or 3 rounds of play, your starting deck looks very different than somebody else's. And you've done, maybe the first game you did some colonizing, but you stopped taking colonized cards. So you ended up with the fewest of colonized. So you end up like next game, you start with only 1 colonized card. And then you play again, and now you start with no colonized cards, and maybe so now you're like, well, I better do warfare because it's gonna be tough to colonize anything, stuff like that. It was a neat way to mix up the game in a tournament setting, and to get like that legacy feel that you might get from a legacy game, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that was something that I just tried one time because I thought it'd be cool, and I'd like to do that some more. I'd like to see that happen some more. I don't know if there's anything like official I could do about it, but I'd love to hear if anyone else tries that.
You could make that official variant. You could even make it like sort of a, you guys asked, so I gave it to you. And make sure, like if a designer is clear about that, when they put out this, I think people are less like, you put in 3 different ships and you only have them all be the same thing. This game is unfinished. Like this variant is unfinished. I think though that if you say you guys asked, I thought this would be a cool idea. Like here is the epic version of Eminent Domain. If the game's not epic enough for you, play 3 games of it, and after each game you can do this, and maybe get to keep a single tech or something like that, and really just make that something where they can snowball themselves in a certain direction, and people can explore that. Because like I said, when people have the main complaint of a new player is this game is getting over super, super quick, that's something that I really think you could do solid, man. And yeah.
One thing that's a little unfortunate, and one of the reasons the scenarios are so good, is that it's a little unfortunate. A lot of new players have trouble getting from the early game into the mid game, and that's what results in games being quote unquote short, because everyone like colonizes too much, basically.
Yes.
And not only is it shorter than it should be, but also you also didn't get to the mid game even. Like you've just got a deck full of colonized cards, which it's kind of unfortunate because like, what are you supposed to say? Like, play better and that won't happen? That's kind of rude, right? But like, that is a kind of an unfortunate thing, but it is a solution. Something that the scenarios actually help solve, because the scenarios kind of jumpstart you into the mid game a little bit by, like you said, it's kind of like having played the first couple turns or whatever. It gets you at level 2 tech play. It jumpstarts you past the early game. So I think that's the best way for people to kind of figure out how to progress in the game, so they don't have a disappointing game that ends early and they've got a deck full of colonized cards and they haven't gotten any research. It kills me a little bit when I read a post online where they say, "Oh, why are there even 5-point techs, that level 3 techs? You can't even get them. Why are they even there?" And I'm like, I finish every game with like 2 of them in play. I don't know, like I don't know. I had amusing story about that. I was at Essen, and Pegasus had put out Eminent Domain that year in German. And I had free time, and I was wandering by the Pegasus tables where they were demoing it. And some German guy walked up to me who was demoing the game and started talking to me in German. And I'm like, I don't speak any German. So I told him like that I spoke English. And he goes, "Oh, okay. Do you want a demo? Are you speaking English now?" And I was like, I told him that it was my game and I didn't need a demo. And he was like all excited to talk to me. And he said, "Oh, I love this game. It's great. I want to talk to you about it." Meanwhile, some teenager walks up, or some 20-year-old or something like that, and he wanted a demo. So I'm like, okay, teach him how to play or whatever in German, and I'll wait and I'll play the kid. So he taught him the game, and I was playing this 2-player game with this kid who spoke German, and I didn't speak any German. Meanwhile, I'm talking to this guy. And so while I'm playing, and I'm just kind of playing, I'm not trying terribly hard to, whatever. I'm just kind of playing so the kid can see how the game goes. And the guy asked me this question. He's like, "The only thing I don't like about this game is like, why is research even a thing? I can't see how research is possibly any good ever." And I was like, "Really? Because research is like the strongest part of the game." And he goes, "No, I've never seen anyone do any good with it." And this is now a third of the way through the game at least. And I'm like, and I hadn't done any research yet because I was trying not to kill this kid with this. Like, I don't want to triple. Right? So I'm like, you don't think research is powerful? He goes, "No, I can't see how it could possibly be." And I said, "Watch this." And I started then doing some research, and this is a good third of the way through the game. And I ended the game with like twice that kid's score with a bunch of research in play and whatever. And he's like, "Oh, I see it can be strong." And this poor kid just got dominated in this game by, he doesn't know I designed it. Like, yeah, I'm just some guy, right? And he's like, "Oh crap." But he ended up liking it. He actually bought a copy. I signed it for him. I had the guy tell him that it was, don't feel bad. I played a lot of this game, whatever. So it actually ended up being a fun story or whatever. But I thought it was an interesting one too, because it kind of illustrates the game is kind of susceptible to groupthink. And if everyone thinks research is bad and they don't do research, then it'll never look like research is any good. But then you have one person come and do heavy research, and you go, oh my god, how could you possibly beat that, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little susceptible to groupthink, and it has this dynamic where a new player could, especially if everyone does it, get stuck in the early game and never get to the mid game, and then the game ends before anything interesting happens. So those are downsides. But even with those downsides existing, I think the game holds up, and I'm pretty proud of the game as it is. And those scenarios do a great job of kind of jumpstarting the game so you don't get stuck in the early game.
And I really don't think that's that much of a problem. Honestly, I think, and Andy and Trent, our other two main co-hosts, like a lot of the games that they play are sort of fragile like that. And they like that fragility. They like the fact that this game can be vastly different depending on how people are playing. So really, there's a lot of ways, Seth, in which this story has just become our topic. Like the story of this game is how you've taken like so many different little pieces of this game that I've seen in expansions. And honestly, like my thoughts going into this were like, when you released Eminent Domain, you had a lot of ideas, but then a lot of them kind of like took a minute for it to get to it. And I don't want to say like I wasn't like one of those people on the forums that'd be like, hey, this was an unfinished game, but like it really sort of came into its own with choices that you made that were actually kind of like ones that you made within the constraints of components that were already existing. Like they were elements that you wanted to expand upon. Like in the example of the Oblivion expansion with the politics, like I thought, well, that just makes sense. It was just like, it was something that he thought would be a cool thing to do at some time. But no, like you had these politics cards because you wanted people to do a little bit of deck customization, but you didn't want it to be something that, you didn't want to like hold their hand. You wanted it to be something they actually get to choose, put a card in their deck that's going to make them make their deck unique from everybody else's. And then it's like turning that into a role with something that you like adding a new role and then using components you already had and then making it all fit within the confines of this politics and finding a way to expand that into something that like really does eventually make this into a sprawling global, like potentially epic experience where you've got like, like agendas that you're fighting over. And yes, it all works within the confines of what seems like an otherwise really tight Euro, though, like you've mentioned, fragile, but in all the right ways, I guess, for ways that like heavy gamers would like to see, being able to go off the walls. Like those are some really interesting choices that you made along the way. And as a developer, I'm kind of wondering, like, if it's not your game, would you be so apt to tell me how I should play it as a new player? Because you've developed games for other people. You've published games for other people. You've had your games published by other companies, like localized generally, like is what it sounds like, but then also like participated in publishing with other people. And TC knows a lot more about your other games, both by TMG and, ones that you've done outside of that. Like I think all the ones he's got behind him are TMG, but like, other TMG games, he's much more of an expert on that. But my big question, what I'd like to hear from you is like, how does all these different roles, like, how do you find yourself sort of selling different things? Because I know that you have a very defined personality, Seth. Like, you're somebody who's really willing to like, take a hardliner stance on something. Like, this is what you should do. And I like the fact that you're willing to go out there on a limb. It's really cool. How much do you see that changing based on what your relationship is to the content? TC, feel free at any time, to refine.
I have my set of questions. Don't worry. Keep on. Go on.
Okay.
Well, so that's a really interesting question that you just asked, and it's a good one. And so just really quickly, though, one thing you mentioned was talking about basically telling people how they should play a game. And that's a little bit of a scary thing to say, because I don't want to tell players how they should play a game. If I ever say anything like that, then what I'm talking about is how to play a game and play well, how to play a game.
To play the way the designer intended, right? Is something,
Well, and for me, when the way the designer intends means, play to win. If you were to play, like I mentioned that, poor play leads to these disappointing games of Eminent Domain. What I mean is the same things that make the game not be short and disappointing are also the same things that will make you win if you make you more competitive.
Yes.
So
they're there for a reason.
I don't want to say you're playing incorrectly. You should have played the way I said. What I'm saying is, if you play the way I'm suggesting, you'll do better, right?
Okay.
I'm not telling you can't play a bad some other way. I'm just saying if you do, you're not going to win.
Sure.
So like that, and that's true of many games. There are many games where you can say, oh, that particular play or strategy or stratagem or tactic is not strong. And if you knew what you're doing, you probably would know that, but maybe you haven't played before. Yes. And I'm just telling you, you could build build your first track in Railroad Tycoon in the middle of nowhere where there's only one delivery and nothing else.
Oh.
But you might do better if you found a place that had multiple deliveries, or whatever. Like there are, any game, the whole point of playing games is to find the best way to play, or the way that will make you win, right? So lots of times there are options that are better than other options. So if I tell somebody you might be better off doing this instead of that, I'm not telling them they're making a lousy decision based on what somebody thought was the way they were supposed to think. I'm saying they're making a lousy decision based on what will make them progress in the game.
Yeah, it's a good distinction to make.
That's a distinction that it might not be a big distinction, but I think people don't like being told they're playing wrong. So I don't want to tell someone you're playing wrong. You can play however you want. But if you are playing, if you're looking for a play that's going to make progress and towards winning, like that I can talk about, because that's not objective.
That's
not subjective.
It's not subjective. It's an objective. Yeah, like this is the more efficient way to get from point A to point B.
Right. And if it's a game that I'm intimately familiar with, like Eminent Domain, then I feel like I know what I'm talking about. If it's a game I've only played once or whatever, I might be wrong, but or whatever. I might be like, this is my strategic assessment. I did this because I thought it was the best thing to do or whatever. Sometimes, but the more familiar I am with a game, like I played a lot of Puerto Rico. I didn't design Puerto Rico, but I played a whole lot. And there are times when I can say this move is better than that move. And I'm not,
Yeah, you're not going to be like stepping on and saying like, oh, you're playing wrong. Like, but to be fair, the Puerto Rico crowd is pretty quick to tell a new player when they've really screwed things up for everyone.
And most of the time, I actually disagree with that. That's one of the things that's like, everyone's like, oh, you have to play this certain way. And for the most part, I disagree with that. I mean, there are times when like there's a move you maybe shouldn't have done. But like,
produce right before somebody's going to take an action that makes you just chuck all of the stuff that you produce. Like, you're just not going to keep it.
Most people say that you like anytime you take Craftsman is probably a mistake or whatever. Like, I don't know. there are ways, he crafted and got coffee and you didn't trade. You're doing it wrong, or you didn't ship rather, and you let him trade his coffee. I don't know that all of those times are so cut and dry, and I think a lot of the times people are kind of repeating that or parroting that without really understanding what they're talking about. And so they think they're right because someone else told them that one time and that player was good or whatever. But like, a lot of times when you're telling someone you're doing it wrong, I think it's dangerous to say like, and anytime you're saying you're doing it wrong because the designer intended such and such, it doesn't matter what the designer intended. Either the move is good towards winning the game or it's bad. If they didn't intend it, they should have changed the rules so it wasn't good. Right? Stone Age has this starvation strategy. One might, I don't know what the designer was thinking, but one might argue that you shouldn't be able to benefit by starving all your people, and it shouldn't be a viable strategy.
Yeah, there shouldn't be like a cap on how many points you lose. Like it should just be like a you get slapped with this much no matter what.
All kinds of different ways it could have been, but they didn't make it that way. They made it something that's a viable strategy. And some people will tell you it's not really viable. It's not better than other things. And maybe that's true if you're at the World Championships or whatever. But I played a lot of games of Stone Age, and I've seen a lot of wins from starvation strategy. But my point is, if you are playing and you're starving your people, I'm not going to say you're playing wrong because that's thematically awkward. I'm going to say, like, if I'm going to criticize that, I'm going to say it's not as strong as farming or whatever. But in that case, I wouldn't say that because I think you could play with starvation strategy. If the designer didn't want people to use a starvation strategy, they needed to make a different incentive not to. So it doesn't necessarily matter the designer's intent. Once the game is out, you play to win. That's part of the when you play a game, the social contract is you're playing to win, not you're playing to satisfy some nebulous, maybe the designer wanted you to play this way. So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up. So I don't like to tell people that they're playing wrong. So if I ever say anything like that, what I probably mean is you're not playing the best, you're not playing optimally. Like you're not playing incorrectly. You're just not playing in the, as well as you could perhaps. So that said, what was the crux of your question then?
How do you so like you have a lot of different roles towards a game. Like when you've developed a game, like I guess you kind of answered the question. I really think you did, because it's like I'm trying to tell you how to play this game optimally. Essentially, that's what you were saying there earlier. You know, it's like like you need to do this, and obviously those things wouldn't exist in the game if they weren't viable strategy. You know, if they weren't things that were impervious to just, you know, hey, if somebody goes, if you're in a 3-player game and 2 players are going hard colonize, the game's going to be over so quick that your research is never going to matter. No, what you're saying is like, no, you should really be researching. And honestly, like, research is the scary part of the game, because it's like I have to dig through that stack of cards. I have to look at that menu, like, whereas everything else is like right in front of my face, and I don't have to worry about too many choices. It's all filtered. There's no filter there. It's all of the stuff potential. So yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. Anyway, though, I do think TC had quite a few like angles he wanted to take towards asking some questions. So TC, I want you to, you know, have your way with Seth here. I definitely just went into a bit of a ringer, but you did a good job answering what exactly I was looking at from there. I mean, I think that what you said about playing optimally would work towards any of the roles, you know, because you're trying to get at the core of how to win, how to play competitively, and I totally understand and respect that, and that's really where a great Euro game design comes from. That's that angle comes from.
Yeah, and ideally, I'll just finish that thought by saying, ideally, a game will communicate that properly to the players. So one failing you could say of Eminence Domain is that perhaps it doesn't communicate well enough that players should or how they can propel themselves from the early game to the mid game and stuff. And as soon as you do, and it doesn't take much. It takes like you play with one player that's played before or whatever, or that's gotten through that, and it kind of changes the whole group think. But as soon as you do that, games start to be a lot better and longer, and you know, appropriately long and a lot more interesting. And some groups get to that point with experience, and some groups never do, and some groups start that way because I don't know, they happen to play that way the first time. But anyway, so any game though, hopefully will communicate to the player what is good, what's good play and what's bad play via their incentives, their scoring.
So it's like scaffolding, so that there's that step to get to that next step, and that way it's not just. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I really do. Yeah.
And ideally, too, the theme will also communicate it. Unlike Stone Age, where it's like, oh, I should not starve my people. Well, it turns out you could. Maybe that's not the best thematic consonance there. Ideally, in the ideal world, not only the mechanics, but also the theme will kind of tell you what you should be doing. If you're playing a game and the theme is like, oh, this game's about making a quilt, like Patchwork, then you should be rewarded for making a good quilt, not for having a crappy quilt and collecting a bunch of buttons. So anyway, moving on. Let's see what TC's got.
My big one is first of all, I would like to see a big box edition of Eminent Domain with all the expansions in it. I think that'd be fantastic if you could make that happen. That'd be great, because there was again, a lot of people like Eminent Domain, but they, you know, I don't play Eminent Domain unless I'm playing Escalation, because I like using the different size ships. But you know, if that could happen down the road. But my big question is, there have been 2 expansions I've been waiting a very long time for. One of them, and these are both tasty mystery games, one of them is actually happening because I did see that they kickstarted Homesteaders with finally the expansion that's been promised for years for that thing. So I'm very excited about that. Secondly, I know for a fact you have an expansion for Terra Prime that you've been sitting on. Because back in the day when I was playing this and looking at that and reading your design notes, I know that you at least were working on one or you have one. And I think the reason you said you didn't publish is because I think only 2,000 copies of this game was actually pushed out that were actually salvageable from the initial print run of this thing. But please tell me you still got that expansion on the works, and please give me some reassurances that maybe or could you just send me a copy? Maybe, because my daughter and family, we really like Terra Prime. It is our go-to pick up and deliver game. We love the humor in it. We like the art. We even like the crappy components and the funky smell. It's all part of that first edition.
Well, man, I mean, like I told you when I saw you, like it never gets old hearing someone come up to me and say something about Terra Prime and liking Terra Prime, because that was a trial. So, but before I get to that, let me just really quickly say, at some point, Oblivion was probably the last expansion that I'm gonna do for Eminent Domain. So at some point we might do a big box and like put it all together in a box. I don't know when that'll be or
You can
what will.
Luxify it. I'm okay.
And so that might be a thing that we do in the future. Along that line, though, I do have one bit of content for Eminent Domain that I haven't done anything with, and I might maybe put out as a promo or something at some point, called Emperor Avatars. It's sort of like scenarios in that it gives you a starting thing, but it doesn't give you a whole starting setup. Instead, it's you sort of draft them. There's a left half, right half situation where you've got like left halves of your avatar and right halves, and each half has like an ability or a benefit or a power. And what you'll do is you'll sort of snake draft. So like you'll get first pick, you'll pick one of them, and then you go around the table, and then the last player will get like two, and you come back around, and you put them together. And so you'll have two powers, and maybe they complement each other, maybe they don't, maybe they're powerful, maybe they're not. And it worked pretty well, and I liked it, and I just never have done anything with it. So I decided it wasn't big enough deal to like add to Oblivion. It wasn't part of like the agenda stuff. It didn't really relate, so I didn't put it in there. So I've got this one bit of content that you might one day see. And then there's also an Eminent Domain dice game that I'm basically done with.
Yes!
Which
Joe's favorite mechanic. Oh, I'm all on this one.
So
yes!
the dice game, it's not a roll and write. It's a dice game that is reminiscent of Eminent. It's Eminent Domain themed. It's basically like playing Eminent Domain. I always like the card game better, but one of my testers actually likes the dice game better. So that's weird to me, but whatever. Yeah, so that's a thing, and I think I'm going to call it Eminent Domain Chaos Theory because I couldn't think of a better name for it. But anyway, so those are things coming up in the questionable future for Eminent Domain. So
plastic cups that make a lot of noise, like Roll for the Galaxy, that would be fantastic. So I'm like, yeah, what are you playing? I'm playing the Eminent Domain Chaos Theory.
Well, we should get those Pop-O-Matic things or something.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so that's some stuff to answer your question about Big Box and what's down the line for Eminent Domain. But now that we've beaten the Eminent Domain as much as we possibly can, yeah. So you asked a couple of other things about my other game, Terra Prime, and like I said, it was a bit of a trial when we started 9 years ago, and we printed up 2,000 copies each of Homesteaders and Terra Prime with some manufacturer. And we even did our due diligence. We checked out some game that they had made. It was called Galaxy's Edge, and it had very similar components. And we checked it out. It was manufactured by this manufacturer, and it seemed fine. It was fine. There was no problem. We bought a copy at the store, and it was fine. And so we thought, okay, no problem. And we went with them. And oh my goodness, it did not work out for us. We had some hassle and some problems with the first print run. And we ended up, Mike and I spent a week in a Atlanta warehouse trying to salvage as much as possible, like you talked about. Mm-hmm. We only had 2,000 of each to begin with, and we threw probably a third of that away.
Wow.
Because it was just not good. Miscut, miscollated, misaligned, some mold. Like, it was rough. And so there aren't a whole lot of people that ever got a chance to play Terra Prime. Now, I'm happy to say that of the people I've talked to that have played it, I get a lot of good feedback. Like, people have dug the game. Yourself notwithstanding, or not, for example, notwithstanding is the wrong word, but like yourself. So I have always wanted to kind of get a second chance at that. I was kind of bummed out. That was my first published game. I was really excited when it was coming out, and I felt like it was sort of like tainted by this bad production and this unfortunate circumstance. And frankly, I was surprised that Michael persevered and kept going with Tasty Minstrel. I thought, okay, well, that was a good try. Too bad for that. But he said, no, he kept going. And thankfully, because now here we are 9 years later, and TMG's established, and we've got a lot of good games, and we've employed people, and we've got a lot of stuff going on for us. But that said, I've always wanted a chance to get a do-over for Terra Prime, because it never really, I feel like it didn't really get its chance to like get out there and have people play it. Over the years, as you mentioned, I from having read my design notes, I did make an expansion for it. I never published that because we never even did a second run of Terra Prime.
Which you did of Homesteaders, which has surprised me. I'm like, oh, finally, second edition of Homesteaders. Terra Prime's got to be around the corner. Crickets.
Yeah, well, that didn't work out. I think partly because Homesteaders was more of a hit with the BGG audience, and Terra Prime was less so because it had like the dice combat and stuff. Maybe that had something to do with it. Whatever reason, never really got a chance. But I did make an expansion, so I've got an expansion. And at this point, 10 years, I made that in 2006 actually. So this is now 12 years later. I've learned a thing or two, and I've gone through, and there are things that I wish I'd done differently in Terra Prime. And what I'm happy to say is that I'm finally going to get a chance to update Terra Prime, fix those things that I would have done differently, include the expansion, and retheme it into the Eminent Domain universe, which turns out is a thing, because apparently I can just all I can do is design Eminent Domain over and over again as a prequel, and it's going to be called Eminent Domain Origins, and it's going to come out next year at the end of this TMG's 10th anniversary extravaganza, which we'll talk about some more in a minute. So I'm really excited to revisit Terra Prime as Eminent Domain Origins with new art. It'll be Eminent Domain style art, and instead of yellium and bluium and greenium, you'll have
Oh, that's so much fun to say though when you're
silicon.
teaching. Because Kate was like 5 seconds ago. She was young. It was like over right after Stone Age. What's that? That's yellowum. Really? Yep.
Yeah, I liked those names. I thought it was cute. Whatever. I thought it was fun. A lot of people didn't love that, but I thought it was cute. One person suggested I call blue plutonium, which I thought was cute. But I racked my brain trying to think of other similar puns for the other ones, and I couldn't. So I just went with bluium, yellium, redium. Actually, there's no redium. I was gonna try to call the red stuff redium, but it's not a resource, so I didn't do that. Anyway, I'm excited to see this happen because what I've done is, in addition to cleaning up some of the weird rules and things I wish I'd done differently, and I tried to also update it and modernize it for today's game landscape. But I've also included that expansion you mentioned. Like I've included
Finally, thank you
in the game. It's not going to be like a separate box. I'm just putting it in the game.
Yeah.
This game, I figured this game doesn't have to be like, it's not like a gateway style game anyway, so it doesn't matter that it's got a little bit of extra stuff. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So it's just going to be one box, Eminent Domain Origins. So you can look for that about this time next year, probably, or by Gen Con next year, perhaps. Maybe Essen. We'll see exactly when it comes out. Art's being done on it right now, actually, by my good friend Ariel Seone, who is the same guy that did the art for Homesteaders. So there's that. Does that satisfactorily answer your Terra Prime question?
That's actually quite exciting. I've been jonesing for because I think when I mentioned it's like, dude, all I gotta do is retheme this to Eminent Domain, throw it on Kickstarter, and it should make it because Eminent Domain is so popular.
Well, it turns out that it fits very well in the Eminent Domain universe. It happens to be that there are 4 planet types. So there are 4 planet types in the domain, and it happens to be that like there's resources like the aliens. It all kind of fits, and thematically, it's a prequel. So in Eminent Domain, you've got your own. Everyone's got their own empire. So if you, in that world, if you in the past, before everyone had their own empire, they all worked for the Terran Federation, vying to be admiral, and by exploring space, setting up colonies, transporting resources back to the space station. The whole Terra Prime thing. So I'm really excited for that to happen. I've played the game not that long ago, and it holds up. I actually played it quite a bit recently with the trying to tweak it and update it, and it holds up. It's fun. I like it. I don't think it's a bad game, even now, even 10 years later.
How do you feel about having some of that? I know parts of that game was actually featured as kind of an Easter egg in Belfort. There was like the UFOs and the money and stuff. I was like, I think this is a UFO from Eminent Domain, guys. And we started looking at it like, yeah, it is.
Yes, Josh Capel did the art for Terra Prime, and he also did the art for Belfort. And so he hit the art for Belfort is very adorable and it's very great. And he hit a bunch of little things in there. The clipboard has a little like scratched into it. Sedstrel was here. Sedstrel is my online name.
Yeah.
And it's got like a you can. On the player boards, there's a little like it's got some gold coins like in the game, and then you can see the edge of like a credit chip from Terra Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the UFOs crashed on the board somewhere.
There's actually, I think there's some dwarves like building one is what it is. So there's also on the board, there's a lot of small details. Like there's a little dragon, like the TMG logo dragon being surrounded by like a party of adventurers. There's one of the buildings is a bank, and there's 5 regions on the boards. There's 5 banks, and then one of them, like there's a heist going on, like somebody's broken into the back and they're stealing stuff out of the bank. Like there's all kinds of cute little Easter eggs in that. There's somebody on the like a guard on the wall, one of the walls that's like sitting down reading a book, and if you look closely, it's the rule book for Belfort, I think.
Yeah.
So like there's all kinds of little Easter eggs, which is great, and it was fun to just have those in there, and it's largely it's just that's Josh like adding stuff in for fun. Like you got to put something. It's fun to have little Easter eggs and little callbacks, and a lot of our games are kind of in the same universe. Like we have this, I call it the Gulls Bottom universe. Like Harbor was in this universe in a town called Gulls Bottom, and then a more recent game Harvest came out that I worked on that like I set it in that same universe, and you get like some callbacks and some references and some similar characters, whatever. The Harvest, the worker placement game, and for the workers I actually used the same shape as the Scoville workers because I thought that'd be a fun little callback. So I don't know, it's fun to like add those things in. I think it's fun for players to, if they once in a while they'll recognize, like you did, like, oh look, that looks like something from that other game or whatever. Like I don't know how many people have noticed that the Harvest workers are the same as the Scoville workers, but it's it's there in case anyone figures it out.
Yeah,
it's just a little thing.
Yeah, it was fun just putting that Belfort board together and just looking at all the little details in that and all the little Easter eggs. It was quite amazing.
I believe there's a thread on BGG that kind of outlines all the Easter eggs that are in there. That you could look that up to see if you got them all, I guess.
Oh, I just remember seeing a UFO going, "Hey guys, I think that's from Terra Prime." You mean that old game you got that smells bad? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And that brings us to the other game that you got behind you, Homesteaders. So Homesteaders is our other launch title. So it had a similar issues to Terra Prime, and so but it did get a reprint at some point, and we actually updated the art a little bit on that reprint back in the day. So there's been two, I guess, editions of Homesteaders so far, and that has been due for a reprint for a little while now. And as you mentioned, it's been due for an expansion.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of an expansion for that for a long time.
Yeah, for a long time. And then the designer, Alex Rockwell, was thinking about doing an expansion about 4 years ago, and he started kind of thinking about it, but I think he got busy or something. I think he moved to Portland. Maybe he's back in Seattle now.
In Hillsboro. He's local here. I've actually met him.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
I knew he moved over there. I didn't know he moved back or whatever, but I don't know. I haven't talked to him in a while personally, but I know that he got real busy and he didn't end up doing an expansion after all. So a couple years ago, I was in Seattle and I talked to a friend of mine, Sean McCarthy. Sean has a design credit to his name. He did he worked on Shadowrun Crossfire.
Oh, yeah.
By the way. So I was talking to this guy, and he's a friend of Alex's, and he was around when Alex made Homesteaders, and he worked on it with him, and he tested a bunch and stuff like that. So he's very familiar with the game. And I said, if Alex is busy, how would you like to make an expansion to Homesteaders? And he thought it was a great idea. He liked the idea, and he worked on it. He thought about it, and he decided what to do, and he ended up making an expansion. And now that expansion is available on Kickstarter, along with the long-awaited reprint of Homesteaders. And because we're coming up on our 10th anniversary, this is a 10th anniversary edition of Homesteaders. So what does that mean? So that means it's going to be it's going to have some upgrades, some component upgrades. The rules are all the same and the artwork's all the same. So it'll if you've already got the second edition, the only thing that it adds if you want to upgrade is the component upgrades, but they're not insignificant. What I've got is we've got some metal VP tokens, like those stars. They'll be out of metal.
The sheriff badges.
The little sheriff badges, yeah. And as of today, actually, it was announced on the Kickstarter that there's also going to be, there'll be a silver sheath, like sleeve. A box sleeve.
Yeah, okay.
To commemorate the 10th anniversary. But also, apparently now, according to the new update on Kickstarter, there is also going to be metal coins for the silver in the game. So there are going to be some component upgrades. So people who do have, especially the first edition might be
the first edition. Yeah.
You might it might be worthwhile to upgrade at this point now that there's a 10th anniversary edition that's going to be a little bit fancier, and have the art from the second edition. If you've already got the second edition, it still might be worth your while if you like metal coins and metal stuff. But even if you don't, even if you decide not to go with the 10th anniversary edition, because you've already got the game or whatever, you might be interested in getting the expansion. Now, the expansion is on Kickstarter as well. You can pledge for just the expansion or just the base game or both, and you get a pretty good price actually on the Kickstarter. But what does the expansion add? So let's talk about that for a second. Actually, let's rewind it. Does everyone know what Homesteaders is? Like, should we talk about what Homesteaders is?
I do. I'd like to just say for the record, Homesteaders has one of the best 2-player variants on a bidding game I've ever seen.
And that's something, the 2-player variant was really popular, and we actually added it in the second edition.
Yeah.
So it's in the rule book, and it'll continue to be in the rule book now for this edition. But for those that don't know, Homesteaders is a strategy game and by Alex Rockwell, who was well known at the time for writing strategy articles for Puerto Rico and Kalis. He designed this game. It was heavily inspired by games like Vegas Showdown with auctions that work that way. And some of the cool things about it are, so what you're doing is you're bidding for the right to build a certain type of building, and there are different types. And when you get the right to build a building, you get to build any building of that type that's available, and you put that in front of you. And the buildings have different incomes and different point values and different a couple of them have powers. And then you iterate. You go. There's 10 rounds of auction and then building, auction, income, and then auction, income, and then auction. And as you build these buildings, you get more different combinations of income, which kind of dictates what buildings you can easily afford. But some of the interesting thing this game does is that auction, like I said, you're auctioning for the right to build, say, a commercial building, not any specific commercial building, just a commercial building. So if I want one commercial building and you want a different commercial building, we're still in competition, even though we want different things, because we both want the right to build a commercial building. So that makes the auctions interesting, for one thing. Another thing it does is there are one fewer auctions than there are players in the game.
Yeah, someone's going to get hosed.
Yeah, so one player, one player is not going to build a building, but if you do pass and don't build a building, well, I'll say at least one player, more than one player could pass, I guess, you get to advance your marker on the railroad development track, which is like a consolation prize. And the more you do that, the more powerful prize you get. And some of the auctions that you win let you additionally, or some of the buildings you buy let you additionally go up the track too. So you can end up getting quite a bit of rewards out of that as a consolation, which is not as good as building a building perhaps, but maybe is good for you. And the third thing that the game does that is really good, I think, is it allows you to take debt anytime you want in order to get money. So what does that mean? That means you can really afford anything you want. You've got infinite money, but the problem is debt is worth negative points at the end of the game. And it's worth more and more negative points. So if you have like 3 debt, that's only negative 6 points, which is not great. But if you have 5 debt, now you're talking negative 15 points. And 6 debt, now it's negative 21 points. So you're really starting to add up. Which means what? It means you want to pay this debt off. When you take debt, you only get $2, but if you pay it off for $5. So you got to be a little bit careful how much debt you take if you plan to be competitive.
Especially if you don't get a bank.
There exists a building that lets you get rid of some debt, and then there's some ways to do it. But yeah, basically you can do whatever you want, but if you're not careful, you're going to put yourself out of the game if you take too much debt, or you'll have to find a way to deal with it. But the fact that you can take debt means you're never screwed out of what you really want to do. If you make a mistake and underbid and someone overbids you, you can still get that thing you wanted. It just costs you a little more. And in this case, that means negative points at the end of the game, but it still might be worth it. It might be worth taking negative, 2 pieces of debt to get that 12-point building or whatever. So that's kind of the debt thing is neat. And then the last thing this game does that I think is really good, and this I've got a special affinity for because it's sort of my contribution is I suggested this to the game, is there's an open trading market thing. So there's like 9 different resources in the game. So it's difficult to produce all the exact right resources for what you want to get. And you can build towards that. You can say, oh, later I want a building that costs like cattle and steel. So I better make a steel mill and whatever makes cattle. I forget.
And the cows are really cool. Check it out. They're little painted. I love the cows in this game.
Sure.
The components in this game are fantastic. But yeah, go on.
So if you don't get those things, how can you, what if you want to buy something that costs steel and you don't make steel? Well, there's another resource called a trade chit, and you can use trade chits and money to buy whatever resource you want anytime you want. Also, you can use a trade chit and a resource to sell it for money and a point. So this open trading market gives you some flexibility. Now you can just try to buy and sell every resource that you want, but it's just not efficient. So you're still better off
at all.
You're still better off getting the buildings that produce what you want, but it gives you a lot of flexibility to get exactly what you need. if without getting kind of shafted, like if you don't get the building you wanted, you can still get the resource you need access to. It's not so bad to buy one steel, but if you need steel every turn, you're good at, you want a steel mill or something. So those are like some of the major things I like about Homesteaders. And it's a very good strategy game where you get to like go through the soft tech tree of the buildings to like get a combination that's good. So what is the expansion add? So the expansion adds a couple of things. The first thing it adds is a 5th player. So that means an extra auction stack, so you can have 4 auctions for 5 players. It adds, of course, an extra homestead tile for a 5th player and a bid marker and everything. And it adds some more resources, so you have enough to go around. And instead of adding like just a handfuls of more resources just to make sure you have enough, I decided that it would be cool to have like some oversized big fat cows and big apples and stuff, which count for 5. They count as 5 of a resource. So there's going to be some oversized fun, like big chunky resources. They count as 5 of a kind. And a couple new buildings. So the new buildings, so this is again designed by Sean McCarthy, not Alex Rockwell. And so Sean looked at what people were looking for in the game and tried to provide that. So one of the big complaints that especially nowadays compared to 10 years ago that people have is that all the buildings are the same every game. Now that doesn't, I had the same complaint come up for Eminent Domain actually. It's not really accurate because you don't have access to all the same buildings every game. It depends on what auctions you win. Similarly in Eminent Domain, you don't actually have access to all the technologies every game because it depends on what planets you have. But it is the case that maybe if you win the residential auction, you've only got so many choices. So next game, if you again win the residential auction, you've got the same couple of choices. So one of the things that he did to address that was he added a couple of new early game buildings that kind of increased the early game strategy potentials. But to be honest, that's not the thing that adds variety to the game. So people that had the complaint would still have the complaint, even with a couple more buildings. The main thing that the expansion adds that does address that concern, and it is a valid concern, especially nowadays. I think people are really more into variable player powers or asymmetric starts or variety in setup and things like that. But rather than arbitrarily nerf strategies by randomly taking certain buildings out of the game every time, that would just make certain strategies not available, so everyone's doing the same thing. And that's kind of lame. But what this expansion does instead,
ooh, shots fired. Sorry. Anyway, keep going.
So instead, what this expansion does is it adds. Sean made a bunch of event cards, and so yes. So have you played In the Year of the Dragon before?
Yes, I love In the Year of the Dragon.
I do too. And do you know how like there's events that are like face up from the beginning of the game? 12 of them, and you get to see what's coming
cool
up.
Stuff. Yeah.
So it works like that. There are 25 event cards, but you only have 10 rounds. So you're only going to use 10 of them. And they're sorted. There's like the settlement phase, the town phase, and the city phase. So these are also sorted. So there's 8 for the town phase, but you only use 4 of them in any game, for example. So you put them all out there face up, and you'll get to see what's coming up. And what these do is they offer you different opportunities that you extra opportunities to buy a building, extra opportunities to get points if you've done a certain thing. Like there's one that says, show all your wood. You get 1 point per wood you've hoarded.
Wow.
So like, what does this do? It means even though the buildings are the same ones that were there last game, you'll evaluate them differently because of these events. For example, that one I just mentioned that gives you points for having wood. Well, if that's in play in round 3 or something like that, maybe you don't want to spend your wood right away. Instead, maybe you want to gather some wood and then save it for round 3, get a few extra points, and then spend wood. So maybe you're not going to buy things that cost wood in the early game, whereas last game, that event wasn't in play, and you spent your wood right away on different... So you'd have, you're evaluating buildings differently, and you're going to build things differently based on what is available, what opportunities are available in these event cards.
So the events are going to come out at certain, like I know there's like 3 phases. They're going to come out at particular points in the game, like during the city phase, like at the end.
Well, you'll take 4 event cards for the settlement phase, 4 for the town phase, and 2 for the city phase.
Okay.
But you'll take those, but you'll put them all out at the beginning so you can plan ahead for them. There might be
so they're gonna be
an event coming up in round 6, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna build towards benefiting off that event in round 6 because it benefits the person that has the most copper or whatever. So I'm going to make sure I generate some copper so I can benefit from that or whatever. So, which if that weren't in play, you might not care about copper or things that cost copper, right? So this, I think, will do what people have really been wanting, which is add a lot of variety to the game, and it'll do it in a way that preserves the strategic integrity of the game. And I think that'll be a real boon for players who like this game and want to play it, but want it to feel more different from game to game, which is definitely something people are more into nowadays than they were 10 years ago. And so I think this will provide that. So I think people will really dig this expansion. Even if you don't want to play with 5 players, I think these event cards are the main part of the expansion. And as a bonus, you can play with 5 players if you want.
Nice. Those events sound fantastic. I'm looking at the Kickstarter now. Like one of them says like you have to pay like a coin for every building you have. So if you know that's coming, you're like, oh crap, I gotta like start preparing for this, or it's gonna get really bad here at the end.
Right. So speaking of the number 5, Seth, there is a quiz right now up on Board Game Geek, and there's some controversy surrounding this. Are you familiar with the 3 out of 5?
Well,
quiz?
So I saw that in the chat. Somebody mentioned that, and here's the thing: someone asked me for questions, so I wrote some questions and I indicated which answers were correct. But I have not seen the quiz online, and I don't know what is going on. So why don't you tell me, if you can, what's going on? Do you know what's going on with that?
I just read through, and it was like page after page. I'm pretty sure they probably, it's really easy when making a quiz to, and as a teacher, I make quizzes all the time, and it's kind of hilarious when I accidentally check the wrong box, and it's like,
I mean, that's
like, hold on.
Here, let me do the quiz while we're talking. I'm going to do the quiz really fast, and I can see if I come out with 3 out of 5. So,
3 out of 5.
Yeah,
you're on the spot.
Let's find out. So anyway, go ahead and keep talking. I'll just do this on the side.
Let's keep going. Actually, so I'll just keep doing my hype, because one of the hypes was to do Homesteaders. So if it's cool here, as we keep doing this research, I'm just going to say that Hellboy: The Golden Army is a cool looking IP. I'm a very big fan of the Guillermo del Toro movies. I'm not too familiar with the comic books, but it looks like they did a good job making this comic book art a part of a larger cooperative game. I have no idea what the gameplay is going to be like, and it's one of those where it's like it's a Kickstarter project. I'm not as big of a fan of Hellboy as I am of Batman. And now, Seth, I know you might be judging me and thinking like, oh, this is a guy who loves his miniatures games. This is not me. This is not me. I'm not your miniatures backer. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who hears you tell me like, no, the game's about like playing ideally, playing optimally, playing to win. And that totally resonates with me. That's generally what I play with. But Batman, that's it. And then like, now we've got Hellboy, and it's like, this isn't quite Batman, but at the same time, it's like maybe even cooler. I don't know, but it's like, I don't know. Anyway, will I back it? I have no idea. Probably not, because there's just way too many good things right now that are on Kickstarter, and I'm going to have to be judicious here in what I choose. Also, of those that I'm referring to, of course, Homesteaders. Also, The Estates by Capstone Games is looking to be like a really awesome bidding game. So, yeah, that's the end of my hype. I really don't know what I'm going to end up doing, but probably not backing that. But anyway, it just still looks really cool. And I love the way that they're using almost like a mixture of the artwork from Vast together with the comic book art style of Hellboy to make a really beautiful package.
Wow, I'll have to look into that one. I'm going to Haptera Prime Origins. That I just found out about it. We're going to Kickstarter.
Eminence Domain Origin.
Yeah. No, actually, the game I'm going to hype is remember way back in the day when I first was going to a podcast and I mentioned Villages of Valeria, and Joe, you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you like Villages of Valeria. Well, they got an expansion out for that called Landmarks, which I'm quite excited. It's already funded. I'm quite curious to see what this is going to add to the base game. Villages of Valeria, in case you're not familiar with it, it's like Puerto Rico, where you take an action and everyone else can follow off of it, and you're just building a village with cards that are out. It's a pretty slick, very light version, I would say, of Race for the Galaxy that my family likes to play. And there's an expansion on it. I like the game as it is, and it sounds like more stuff for it. So, hey, can't be that bad, right? So, yeah, that's my hype. Villages of Valeria, the Landmarks expansion.
TC, do you know a guy named Rick Holsgraf?
Yeah,
He
actually,
lives up in-
I played. I have an autographed copy of him. I got to play with him, and he actually had a hammer and a orb he posed that I took a picture with, like one of the cards. Guy's a fantastic guy, and I think I
Yes.
actually played the game with his mother. I think, or it was a really cool time, and he's a really neat guy. He's pretty
Yeah, so he's the designer, or one of the designers, I guess, of Village of Valeria. That was based on a game called Deckville that he had that I saw him make. He's a friend of mine that I met online at the Board Game Designers Forum a long time ago. He's also a big fan of Railroad Tycoon, by the way. In fact, he designed an expansion to it.
For it. Yeah. And actually, I got to play. He has a prototype, which at the time he was calling Knights of Valeria. I don't know if that title's going to stick, but that's pretty cool little game he has there. I'm hoping to see that come out at some point.
That's cool. Very good.
So what's these questions here about Homesteaders? I'm curious.
Okay, so I just took that quiz, right?
Did you fail?
I got 4 out of 5, and I even double checked. I think they must have a mistake, because I double checked before I answered them to make sure that they're correct. That I was putting the correct answer, and so something's not right. So.
Yep. So something's not right, but there was a trick question in there. So the 3 out of 5 that everybody else has been getting is still one wrong.
Yeah, yes, that's still wrong. One of them is one of the answers must be incorrect, because I only got 4 out of 5 after putting the correct answers in. But 3 out of 5, something else is wrong if you're getting 3 out of 5. So there's that. And I thought they were relatively easy. The first time I did a contest like this, I was trying to make the questions all tricky. What game was this? I don't remember what game this was, but I really wanted people to like have to read through the rules and like look for stuff. So I made the questions all tricky, and people were not thrilled with that. So yeah, they're like, I had to put a lot of work into like answer these questions or whatever. And so it turns out the thing to do is to make questions that are practically trivial if you looked at the Kickstarter page, because the whole point is to get people to look at the Kickstarter page.
You just want them to
so
click
if you
on it.
glance to the Kickstarter page, you should be able to answer these questions like for the most part. Like what's the 5th player color? I'm pretty sure it's painfully obvious on the Kickstarter page if you look.
You just scroll down into the pictures. You don't have to read anything for that one.
Yeah. Now this next one might be a little trickier. Is how many event cards do you use? You might have to actually read something about what the event cards are or how they work. And that might be the trick question, because one of the possible answers is the correct answer. How many are used each game? Another of the possible answers is how many are there total. And if you just looked at that, what you get thing, you'll see that you get 25 event cards. And if you answer 25, that's incorrect, because you don't use 25 in each game. You use 10. So there's the answer for people who are.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wanted to jump in and be like, no, it's 10, but I was letting you spoil it, I guess.
Yeah, and then there's one about the values of the victory point tokens. If you look at the picture, I'm pretty sure it shows it. And how many rounds are in a game of Homesteaders? Again, you might need to like look that up somehow or read that somewhere, but it should be available if you try it a little bit, or if the game has been around for a long time.
If you just click on the rule book, that should be pretty clear, I would think. That would be one of those fairly early.
That might be the type of question. That one and the how many do you use each game? Those might be a little too in depth. Like you can't just look at the page and intuit the answers. So maybe those were a little too tricky. And then this one's tricky. It's not that tricky because you can just look at the picture of the resources. But how many resource types are there? It's a little tricky though, because like what counts as a resource? Like maybe, but so I wonder if that's tripping people up. But if you look at all the possible answers, like it's 2, 4, 6, 8, or 12 are the possible answers. And only one of those really makes sense, because 3 of them are you can like prove wrong by looking at the picture, and one of them is right, and one of them, if you can't figure out which one's right between the two, then I mean you should be able to figure it out. I don't know. It's like I don't want to give the answer away, I guess. Should I give the answer away? Does it matter?
I feel like you might have already said it when you made your description. You're like, there are this many types of resources, and I think I remember the number, but we'll just make people go back and listen to our episode again.
I'm just gonna throw.
This is up to this is your judgment call here, Seth. This is not. I mean, honestly, like if our listeners really did make it all the way through here, listening to us talk about this, do they deserve it?
Well, if they've listened, they shouldn't need to. No, I'm going to leave that one tricky because I think that's a fun one to kind of figure out the answer to. But I'm not sure what's going on with the 4 out of 5. I clearly answered them.
You got a 4 out of 5.
I had the answer key, right? I had the answer key. So let me, unless my answer key is wrong, well, that's not possible. I made it. But anyway, yeah. So I'm not sure what's going on there. But at least 4 of them are correct.
All right. Well, we've at least established as much as we can for the moment. We cannot figure out anything more. And honestly, Seth, this has just been from the top. It has been extremely engaging. Words per minute were very high, which is always entertaining for me. I mean, the snapback and the basis for a lot of your reasoning behind why you've made different decisions in your design process, and also just the perspective that you come at makes me engaged. And also, I will be keeping an eye on everything that I see coming from you in the future. And hopefully, when we get a chance here at a gaming convention where you actually are not just working ridiculous amounts of hours in a day, we'll hopefully get to maybe throw something down at the table and actually get to play together for once. Yeah,
that would be fun. It might be a little while before I go to convention again because, as I mentioned before the show started, I'm going to have a new arrival in a month.
But look on the bright side. When they get to 13 or 14, they play games with you.
Yeah, sure. That's, I got the long con going. I'm going to make a playtester for me. I should have thought of this 10 years ago, right? Then I'd have a playtester. But yeah, we're going to have a baby in about a month. 4 weeks. So I don't know that I'm going to be able to go to any conventions for a little while. But eventually I will get back to them. And yeah, so we'll see you do you go to Gen Con or Origins or BGG Con or something?
So one of those. Yeah, one of those at that point, hopefully. But anyway, yeah, good luck with yeah, of course. So good luck with that transition, and hopefully everything goes well and smooth. And thanks for sharing your time with us and splitting between all those different things you got to be doing right now.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's good to come on. I like listening to podcasts, and I mean, I can't listen to all of them, but it's fun to come on and be on them because I don't know, maybe it's vain, but I like to listen afterwards to see if I sounded like an idiot or something. So
oh no, I do it too. It's weird. It feels kind of like it's wrong, but at the same time it's right. I don't know.
Well, this morning I just had my I took a shot at recording something with TC Petty the third, who is another designer that I know, and we've decided to try recording something, and we'll see how it goes and whether we're going to keep doing it. But we might do a monthly segment.
TC Petty, is that the guy behind Argent?
No, that's Trey Chambers, and he's also the designer of Harvard.
Was TC Petty?
Yeah, Xenon Profiteer, Viva Java the coffee game, Viva Java the coffee game, the dice game. What else did he do? Sure. Some other stuff that didn't come out, I guess. There was some stuff that he had on Kickstarter that didn't fund or whatever, and I don't know if that's ever going to come out or not. But yeah, he's a good designer, and he's on the State of Games podcast, and he used to do some design stuff on the Perfect Information podcast, the design segment. So he and I, we did something which we called the Argument Hour, which was kind of fun. And so we'll see if that'll be up. I think it'll be on the On Board Games podcast, I think is where that's going to air. And so listen for that. Listen for the TC Petty, the Seth and TC Argument Hour. And we'll see if that is a popular format and whether we can keep doing it. I think we have a good chance to keep doing it because our schedules are such that we can meet up during the day on a weekday.
That's nice
to do that. And we always like talking design with each other. So watch for that and look for anything from TMG because it's all good stuff. And a lot of the big box stuff from TMG that isn't an import is something I have my hand in. So if you think I'm any good, look for that stuff.
All right. Very cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Also, thanks for being here, TC. It was really fun having you.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's this week's episode. Have a great week of gaming and catch us next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.